Night traffic hums over the Queensborough Bridge like distant thunder. Down below, in a nondescript sedan parked near the curb, a quiet man watches the city move and does his best work standing still. He doesn't kick in doors, he doesn't shout orders. He lets the phones ring, the envelopes move, and the right people talk into the wrong wires, while his name somehow never lands where it should. On paper, he's a ghost. On the street, everybody knows better. This is the story of Anthony Corallo, the man they called Tony Ducks. Get comfortable, adjust your volume, and before we start, drop a comment with your local time and where you're watching from. Chapter 1. The Street Where Tony Learned to Listen. East Harlem wakes with a sound like a kettle just before it sings. Metal shutters roll up, pigeons shuffle along cornices, a delivery boy whistles through his teeth. The hum is steady and kind if you let it be. Anthony Corallo learns this early. He learns to keep his footsteps even and his gaze level, to blend into the quiet arithmetic of the street. On mornings when the river breeze drifts west, the air carries salt and a little iron. It tastes like work. It tastes like errands taken on with a nod and finished with care. The grown men on the stoops know the names of the shopkeepers, the block wardens, the men who organize trucks and carts. They speak softly. They keep their sentences neat. Anthony listens from the curb and stores every detail as if it is bread for later. He moves through markets where crates smell of fennel and oranges and damp wood. He notes which scales stick and which run generous. He notices who tips the sweepers without being asked. The butcher has a laugh that starts deep and ends in a cough. The baker keeps 2 sets of string, one for the customers and one for the friends who never wait long. The boy learns to tell time by the bakery windows, by the rise and fall of loaves, and by the way steam clouds the glass. East Harlem may be loud in the afternoon, but the morning is a lesson in care. Sand is brushed across steps. A child chalks out a box for a game and then wipes it away when the older kids need the sidewalk. A priest crosses the avenue and takes off his hat to a grandmother, as if the sun itself is a guest. Work is a ceremony. The city is an altar. And Anthony, who will one day be called Tony Ducks, is an altar boy with no robe and an ear for patterns. He learns to step around trouble as if it is a pudder he sees from half a block away. He learns that people who shout often have little to say, and that the quiet man at the end of the counter will somehow have the last word without raising his voice. He learns the map of faces, the lanes of favors, and the value of never letting the street guess what you think. He learns to listen longer than most boys can stand. That is his first small talent. That is where the city begins to shape him. The kitchen in his building is warm year-round. A pot simmers. A radio whispers ball scores or church news. The adults sit in a circle of good chairs, the kind that float between apartments depending on whose aunt is visiting. They talk with their hands, but they keep their tone low. Anthony hears the music of it and the caution inside the music. On the back stoop, laundry lines stretch like train tracks to other lives. The women call from window to window about recipes and sons and small repairs. Now and then a name comes up that is not spoken too loudly. The air hushes as if the block itself leans in. Then the talk turns back to soup and school, and who'll watch the youngest while someone runs an errand? The city runs on errands. The city runs on who you can trust to make them. Anthony learns that a kitchen table can be a classroom, a polling station, and a courtroom. He learns that a nod can settle a bill and that a look can command a room. He learns that rules have little rules inside them, and that the little rules are the ones that matter. You pay on time, you do not forget who introduced you, you never arrive empty-handed, not even to say hello. He learns to keep a small envelope for kindness, the way others keep salt by the stove. Back stoops are for confessions that are not really confessions. A man speaks of hard weeks with a shrug, and the boy understands that something went wrong with a truck or a route or a promise. No one says more than needed. No one says the wrong word. The boy takes it in without prodding. He does not ask what happened under a bridge or behind a loading dock. He learns that stories in this neighborhood come without the sharp edges described, only the smooth surfaces that are safe to slide a hand across. He also learns humor, the gentle kind that keeps spirits steady. An uncle flicks his cigarette and says that some people's luck is a hat in the rain. Another uncle says that luck is a coat if you keep your collar up and your head down. The boy files these sayings in his pocket. He understands that adults survive by turning worry into sayings and sayings into routine. He will one day turn routine into authority. For now he washes plates, sweeps the hall, returns chairs to the neighbor on the second floor, and thanks everyone for a good dinner. Trust grows like ivy. It starts small and then covers a wall. Anthony is given simple tasks. Carry a parcel to the tailor, but do not dawdle. Bring a list to the grocer, but check the weight of the cheese. Walk with the old man to his appointment, and bring him back before the light goes soft. The boy does each word to the letter. He returns with change counted twice, and a receipt folded clean. He learns the shopkeepers by their habits. The fishmonger sets aside a cut for a schoolteacher who never pays full price, but always brings a pie. The newsstand man knows which papers to keep under the counter until the first rush passes. The barber reads the weather in the hair of the men who sit down. If the hair is freshly washed, business is calm. If the hair is dry and dusty, there is a scramble on the docks. The barber calls these things forecasts, and no one argues. At the market, crates arrive with chalk marks that mean more than prices. A circle might mean handle with care. A star might mean deliver to the back door. A slash might mean the name of a friend. The boy memorizes the code without being taught. He watches who lingers at which corners. He knows the men who move like door hinges, silent and essential. He likes the drivers who keep their trucks clean and their mouths cleaner. He dislikes shouting. Shouting draws attention, and attention changes the math of a day. Along First Avenue he keeps to the edges of the crowd and studies storefront reflections. A man can learn how to cross the street just by watching how another man shifts his shoulders. A man can note who tips the hat to the patrolman and who chooses a longer route to avoid saying hello. The boy files the patrolman's schedule, the baker's nap time, the time when the girls from the shirtwaist factory flood the sidewalk like deer, nervous and bright. The city is a living clock, and he is learning every hand on its face. One afternoon he takes a parcel to a warehouse where the floor smells of oil and rope. The foreman wears a tie that does not match his shirt. The boy notices this, and calculates away in his head that the foreman must have dressed in the dark, which means he had to leave quickly, which means his boss is nervous. The boy says thank you, takes the receipt, and leaves without looking back. He knows he has learned a small but useful lesson. When people hurry, they make small mistakes, and small mistakes tell longer stories. There are children who talk to fill silence. Anthony is not that child. He lets silence earn interest. He lets it grow into something that can be spent later. He listens to men argue over cards without blinking and later repeats their points in his head like a radio show. He notices that the man who wins often is not the man with the best cards, but the man who knows when the table is tired. He sees adults make their choices. Some chase excitement. Some chase safety. A few chase the middle lane, which is the hardest to hold. The boy imagines a life in that lane, not the headlines, not the back page either, something in between where power moves with patience. He feels drawn to that slope like water to a drain. He is not in a hurry. He knows that the city rewards the unhurried, the careful, the ones who can be trusted to make schedules and hold to them. He carries himself like a clerk of the street, recording in a tidy hand. Men who work on trucks smile at him and call him a good kid. Men who sit in cafes nod at him like they are stamping a ticket. He grows into his nickname without knowing it. You could throw this boy a problem and he would find a way to step aside and let the problem pass him by without touching his coat. He ducks issues, he ducks trouble, he ducks the kind of attention that breaks days into before and after. At night he lies in bed and inventories the block like a shopkeeper counting change. He thinks of the grocer's son who wants to join the Navy, of the seamstress who cries only when she is among friends, of the man with the newspaper who pretends to read but uses the window as a mirror. He thinks of how everything is connected, how a late truck means a short temper, which means a harsh word, which means a promise broken, which means a favor called in. He begins to see the force lines of the neighborhood like strings on a musical instrument. He wants to learn how to tune those strings. This is not a plan, it is a temperament. He is not hungry for a crown, he is hungry for stability. He is hungry for a map that lets him walk through any season without slipping. He looks at the city and decides that order can be kept, if a person is willing to keep it. He also decides that order should not be shouted about. It should be maintained like a garden, with quiet hands and a sense of when to prune. The hum of New York is a teacher with long patience. It tells Anthony that every block is an ecosystem, and every person in it either soothes or stirs the water. He decides to be a soothing current. He holds doors, he smooths conversations, he returns borrowed things before anyone asks. The old ladies at the corner say that the boy is a good omen. The older men say the boy is going places. The boy keeps his eyes open and his mouth closed, and lets both blessings pass through him like air. He learns the garment district as a rumour first. It is a place where fabric moves like river water, and where the real business happens, in offices that smell of coffee and chalk. This is a place where a steady hand is worth more than a loud voice. He hears stories from drivers who make the trip back and forth. There is always a man to meet, a handshake to hold one beat longer, a schedule to adjust with a smile. The boy listens and thinks that someday he will know that maze by heart. He also learns that leadership in his world is often a chair, not a throne. A chair at a table where men eat lunch and nod to one another across plates wrapped in paper. The strongest chair is the one that never looks empty, the chair that is always filled by someone who can be calm and who can listen. The boy knows he is training to be a chair long before he ever sits at that table. His posture improves, his patience grows, his humour stays dry, a little salt on the rim of a glass of water. There are storms, of course. A raid on a backroom game. A relative with a temper that breaks at the wrong time. A rumour that someone has been unalived across town and now the news will sniff around the block. When these waves rise, the boy watches how the neighbourhood lowers its voice and tightens its circle. People check their stories. Deliveries take new routes for a week. The block returns to normal slowly, like a cat settling back into a chair. The boy observes the choreography and decides that he will one day be the person who arranges these steps, not the person who gives the order, the person who makes sure the order never needs to be given twice. The boy's city rewards effort and memory. He trains both. He memorizes the faces of patrolmen who are fair and the faces of patrolmen who like to make a scene. He takes extra time with the kind that enjoy a scene, giving them courtesy and distance. He learns to arrive 2 minutes early in a world where clocks are not respected. He knows that the man who is early looks like the man who is in charge. He learns that if you never rush, people will ask you for help in their own hurry. Then you will hold the schedule. Then you will hold the day. East Harlem teaches him fairness too. He watches his elders settle disputes with a hand on the shoulder and a checklist of what is owed and what is forgiven. He sees that mercy is a kind of leverage, and that leverage works best when it is never called by that name. The boy grows into mercy, the way a tree grows into its rings. He keeps track of who helped him and who needed help. He tries to leave every room a shade more settled than he found it. Soon he is old enough to be asked to carry messages that are more than errands. Stop by the Union Hall and let them know the truck will be late but the driver is good for the delay. Tell the tailor that the bill from last month is understood and will be squared after the holiday. speak to the foreman at the docks and remind him that tomorrow's list is correct and nothing should be added. The boy does these things without adding or subtracting a word. His reliability becomes a story of its own. It travels farther than he does. When the city gets hot in summer, the neighborhood drags chairs to the sidewalk after dinner. The men talk softly, the women laugh in bursts, and the children stage quiet races under the pale lights. Anthony sits near the edge, tipping his chair back just enough to feel the balance point. He is thinking of the day to come, and the week after that, and how a person might carry a whole district in his pocket like a folded map. He is not dreaming of riches, he is dreaming of competence. To be competent is to be welcome anywhere. To be competent is to be safe. On colder nights, he rides the subway just to feel how the city knits itself under the avenues. He watches the stations float by like chapters in a book he is learning to write. He notes where the platform musicians stand, where the night shift cops prefer to lean, where the newsprint gathers in little dunes. Above ground the wind stings, underground the air is stale but honest. He rides and thinks of schedules and routes and how to keep them smooth. He imagines a moving office without knowing yet that one day he will turn that idea into a habit, and that the habit will draw a net around him he cannot see. The boy's laughter is rare but sincere. He laughs at small ironies. The man who preaches thrift and then forgets his wallet. The clerk who boasts of perfect books and then misplaces his pen. The driver who insists he knows every shortcut and then asks the boy which turn to take. Anthony keeps his humour like a pocket knife, folded and ready. It is not a weapon. It is a tool that opens jars of tension. It makes the day a shade lighter. It keeps friends close. In time, neighbours begin to ask him for his opinion, night loudly, night with a fuss. A man will fall into step beside him and ask, slow and plain, whether a job seems worth the trouble. A woman will ask if the landlord can be reasoned with or if a cousin should be called. The boy gives answers that are not fancy. He asks for details. He suggests a calm approach. He offers to make a phone call or walk along for the first part of a conversation. He becomes the person who suggests that everyone take a breath. In a neighborhood that runs on adrenaline, he cultivates oxygen. The hum of the city and the hush of the back stoop grow together in him. He learns to read people better than he reads books, though he reads those too. He likes newspapers because they show how official stories are built. He enjoys the obituaries because they tell the truth about what mattered to people. Beloved for punctuality, treasured for kindness, known for a handshake that sealed 1,000 small bargains. He reads and thinks that day when the city writes about him, he wants them to say that he kept things smooth and made storms pass before they earned a name. Once, in a winter gust, he carries a package down the avenue and it tears open at the corner. A man he barely knows steps from a doorway and helps him gather the contents one by one into the bag. Only later does the boy realize the man is someone people avoid. A whisper follows him down the block. The boy nods to the man anyway and thanks him again. He decides that the world is complicated and that courtesy should not be rationed. He will hold to that. Courtesy is free until you forget to spend it. Then it becomes rare and costly. Years will pass and Anthony Corallo will become a man of influence. But influence begins here, in small gestures and steady errands, in listening longer than anyone expects, in knowing when to keep your head down and when to look up and meet someone's eyes with a promise. The city has a way of recruiting its stewards. It chooses the ones who understand that calm is not the absence of conflict, but the art of arranging it so that people can sleep. Anthony learns that art none morning at a time. He will carry these lessons into rooms with thicker carpets and into cars that never stay parked. He will carry them into meetings that pretend to be socials and into socials that are really meetings. He will carry them into announcements that sound like small talk and into small talk that opens doors. He will be the same person as the boy on the stoop, only with a longer reach and a heavier schedule. He will prefer to be unseen when possible, but he will never be absent. That is a promise he makes to himself and to the block that raised him. For now he is just a boy who returns home with bread that is still warm, who folds receipts with tidy corners, who hears the elder at the corner say the city is a tide you have to learn to swim with, not against. He nods, thanks the elder, and turns down the street that leads to home. The city nods back. The hum approves. The night air smells of oranges and steam and the faint iron of the river. He knows he is in the right place. He knows the first chapter of his life is written in the chalk of these sidewalks. Tomorrow he will add another line. Chapter 2: Threads, Trucks and Telephone Calls. The first time he steps into the garment district with a purpose, and not just curiosity, the air tastes like chalk and steam. Bolts of cloth lean against walls like tall, quiet sentries. Elevators open and breathe out lint. Men in sweaters argue in a soft code where nothing is said directly and everything is understood. Anthony walks slow enough to notice, and quick enough to look like he belongs. He carries a folded list in his pocket and 2 names in his head. He knows better than to take the list out unless asked. Paper is a stage whisper. Memory is silence. He learns the rhythm of the blocks from the river to the avenues, trucks back into narrow mouths of buildings, their tailgates lowering like drawbridges over afternoon streets. On busy days, the whole place sounds like a sewing machine the size of a citid. There is the rattle of handcarts, the snap of twine, the sigh of steam pressing, and the music of 100 phones ringing and being answered by people who sound like they are smiling even when they are not. It is a polite storm. It is also a place where a boy who does not talk much can rise like dough. He is sent to return a favor, then to call in a favor, then to arrange a bet without either side saying out loud what the favor is. He moves along the hallways where fabric samples sway from hooks like flags. He nods to cutters with tape around their necks, and to foremen who carry clipboards like passports. He can tell who owns a room within 10 seconds of walking through the door. The owner is not always the man behind the desk. Sometimes the owner is the who does not need a desk at all. By late morning he is handling schedules for a single truck as if it were a chessboard. He reads routes on a map, and then reads them again in his head with the names of the drivers laid over the streets like another city. He knows who hates the bridges and who sleeps better if the run takes him over the river twice in one day. He balances these preferences the way a good cook balances salt. The right amount makes everything hold together. Too much and the dish collapses into complaints. He likes the drivers. They are practical philosophers with thermoses and luck charms. One says that a day is a rope you coil neatly or you trip over. Another says that traffic is judgment day for the unprepared. They all appreciate a dispatcher who respects their time. Anthony respects time as if it were a person seated at the table. When a driver arrives early, he is praised. When a driver is late for good cause, he is protected. When a driver is late because he talked too long in a diner, Anthony returns the talk with silence and a look that reminds the man who keeps the book. He meets union men in coffee counters where the cups are chipped and the sugar pours like sand from the paper packets. These are rooms of careful manners. No one rushes to shake hands. No one leaves without a clear next step. Anthony learns to phrase requests as weather reports. Tomorrow looks tight around mid-afternoon. Might be smart to move that load earlier. He speaks in calm tones, and the calm becomes contagious. He is young for the role he is slowly taking on. The trick is that roles pay attention to behavior, not birthdays. There is an art to whose phone you call, when you call it, and how long you let it ring before you hang up. There is an art to leaving a message with a first name only, and an art to never asking for more than someone can give you easily. He collects these arts. He makes them habits. He makes them feel like personality, which is the point. In this district, a steady personality is a kind of insurance. You become the person who smooths days, who makes sure a roll of fabric arrives at dawn rather than lunch, who knows which elevator is the only one that does not shudder between floors. He apprentices himself to courtesy and to logistics. He learns where to wait so that the right person sees him first. He stands under the mezzanine where the office glass throws back the reflection of anyone coming his way. He recognizes the silhouettes of the men whose yes matters. He reads the posture of the women who actually keep the books. Those are the true clocks. A glance from one of them can shift an afternoon. He treats them with the respect shopkeepers reserve for scales. Honest scales make a neighborhood possible. One day a shipment goes missing between a warehouse near the river and a cutting room on a high floor. A missing shipment is not just goods. It is a late payroll and a broken promise, and a ripple of anger that will travel down stairwells and into street corners where people keep unhappy memories polished. Anthony traces the path like a prayer. He does not accuse. He asks about a timing discrepancy and a slip of paper with a smudged initial. He notes that a driver switched a route with a friend at the last minute. He notes that the freight elevator was stuck for an hour. He notes that a foreman went home sick. He pulls each note like a thread until the pattern shows. By evening, the missing shipment is found in the wrong room with the wrong tags, not stolen, simply orphaned by a chain of small mistakes. The relief is quiet. No one hugs, no one cheers. The cutting room returns to its machine song. A man with a tie that is too bright claps the boy on the shoulder and says that he kept the wolf from the door. The boy nods and thinks, no, I kept the door from looking like a door at all. He files the lesson. Chaos is loud, order is silent. The open road becomes part of his week as trucking lanes widen beyond the city's edge. He learns the feel of early departures when the sky is the color of old tin. He rides shotgun on a run to a warehouse upstate and discovers the relief that comes with motion. Conversation in a cab has a special honesty. People say more when the horizon keeps changing. He asks about axle weights and winter chains and how to judge a hill from the line of trees. He does not talk much, but he asks precise questions. Drivers respect that. They answer him as if he is already wed of them. On a long ride, he hears a veteran talk about a name that is starting to follow him, Tony Ducks. It is said with more amusement than menace. It suggests that problems slide off him, that subpoenas do not stick, that bad luck sees him coming and chooses another block. He laughs a little and lets it pass. Nicknames are weather, the ones that fit become climate. He does not chase the name or deny it. He lets it be earned by the way days go when he is involved. The jagged part of the job is learning where to say no. Too many favors and the calendar buckles. Too many special deliveries and the regular ones grow resentful. He builds a habit of fair rationing. If a favor serves a larger calm, he finds a way. If a favor is pure laziness dressed as urgency, he says that the schedule is already spoken for. He says this kindly. People test him and then settle. Nothing tames a room like consistent answers. He learns to make a telephone a tool for kindness. He calls a foreman at the end of a long day and lets him know that tomorrow's pressure has been shifted by an hour. He calls a worried cutter and confirms that the yardage she needs is on the first truck. He calls a union steward and gives him a heads up about a routing change so that he can inform his people before rumors do. Each call is short. Each call builds a ledger of trust. The ledger begins to draw its own interest. The city rewards the people who compress problems into neat shapes. Anthony finds that the smallest gesture can compress the most. He keeps envelopes of petty cash labeled in his head, not on paper. Coffee money for the dock when rain slows the morning. Thank you money for the elevator man who holds the gate after hours. Spare change for the clerk who stays late to stamp forms. He does not wave this around. He treats it like oil for a machine that should hum without anyone knowing what keeps it quiet. There are tense days when headlines from other parts of the city spill into these canyons of fabric and freight. A raid closes a back room in another borough, and suddenly everyone in the district speaks softer. These are days for presence. Anthony is not a cop, nor a priest, nor a politician, but he plays a little of each in his way. He shows up. He keeps his walk calm. He lets people see him talking to people who do not lose their heads. Leadership is often nothing more than proof that a steady voice exists within reach. Once, a driver clips a hydrant near a loading dock and turns an ordinary afternoon into a stage show. Water arcs into the air like a silver rope, and the crowd laughs, because laughing is easier than scolding. Anthony steps forward and becomes a conductor. He has the truck pulled forward 2 car lengths. He sends the driver to check the axle. He asks the building porter for 2 mops, and the porter hands them over with a grin. The scene folds back into normal. Later, the driver expects a speech. He gets a short sentence about watching the swing on the tail, and a reminder that the morning tomorrow will start earlier. The driver nods. The lesson lands. No one else needs to know more. He cultivates people who prefer to be useful rather than dramatic. He builds a small circle of lieutenants without calling them by that name. There is a bookkeeper who never misplaces a receipt. There is a runner who moves through buildings like a rumour, never stopping long enough to become a target. There is a warehouseman with gentle hands who can pick the right roll from a stack in the dark. They like working with him because he sees them, and because he shields them from petty feuds that waste afternoons. He does not hold grudges, he holds schedules. As weeks turn into seasons, he refines a belief. Power is not loud, power is punctual. Influence is not a glare, influence is a phone call returned on the first ring. He watches older bosses spend themselves on theatre. He sees how much energy it takes to look important, and how little it takes to be important if you deliver outcomes. He chooses outcomes. He chooses the quiet route to the same destination. People begin to speak of him as the man who does not make you nervous. In a business that lives on nerves, that is a rare and valuable thing. The garment district loves a steady winter. When the holidays pass and the cold sets in, orders flatten, tempers shorten, traffic crawls, and yet coats must be sewn and delivered. Anthony treats winter like a sport. He builds extra time into every plan and says so out loud. He tells clients what they will get, and then he beats his own promises by a small margin. Beating soft promises by a small margin is not flashy, it is gold. He rides in a car that spends most of its day in motion. The streets are his conference room and his file cabinet. He finds that the body relaxes when the skyline slides past. Conversations are measured by stoplights, and by the way the radio murmurs the hour. He keeps notes in his head and lets them settle like coins in a jar. Here is the number of a man who can fix a lift without a fuss. Here is the name of a diner where the cook will make eggs at any hour, as long as you never leave a mess. Here is the time to call if you want to catch a certain buyer before he retreats behind a wall of assistance. Trust deepens until it feels like a floor. People begin to test heavier steps upon it. A contractor speaks to him about a delivery route into a site where the rules are vague and the men are colder than the weather. Anthony arranges it with the kind of detail that seems casual. The route avoids the think corner where tickets multiply like pigeons. The hour chosen is one that keeps the site super from gnashing his teeth. The truck pulls in, unloads, pulls out, and nobody complains. That is the whole point. A clean job leaves no story to tell. He watches how small gifts get tangled with big expectations and learns to keep the sizes aligned. A holiday basket goes to the front desk, not to the corner office. A shiny pen goes to the woman who signs the checks, not to the man who signs his name under them. A warm greeting goes to everyone. When someone insists on more, he offers less. Need is a tide that respects only the shape of the shore. You set your rocks and the water learns them. There is humour in this world, and he keeps it alive because humour keeps men from making mistakes born of pride. When a buyer demands a pallet be carried up a stairwell built for cats, Anthony says that the pallet is a fine swimmer, but not a climber. The room laughs and the buyer decides the elevator is not such an enemy after all. When a clerk insists that a stamp cures all ills, he says that stamps are fine medicine, provided you also read the prescription. The clerk smiles and checks the forms again. Small jokes remove small nails from the road. He expands his understanding of unions beyond headlines. To him, a union hall is not a slogan but a calendar and a ledger and a room where men who work with their hands want to be treated with respect. He treats them that way, not as a tactic, but because it suits his nature. Respect is cheap, and yet it buys more than any other currency. He learns who can be relied upon to calm a crew and who turns sparks into fires. He keeps the first group close and gives the second group fresh air and distance. His days grow long and his nights grow steady. He is not chasing glamour, he is building a machine that runs on predictability. Some in the wider city will one day call him a boss. He thinks of himself as a keeper of roots, a referee for competing promises, a shepherd of trucks and tempers. When they call him Tony Ducks, he smiles, because the name fits in a way that is not about courtrooms. It is about rain. He has learned to let rain slide off his shoulders without pretending the sky is clear. He can sense trouble in the voice on the other end of a line now. A breath taken too sharply. A pause too long before the word tomorrow. When he feels that tremor, he moves fast without looking hurried. He reassigns a load, he brings a skeptical man into a conversation through a back door, where his pride is not on display. He calls a friend in a certain office and asks for nothing, only shares a weather report. The friend later calls him back and tells him the wind is calmer now. They exchange no thanks. Courtesy has no receipt. He keeps a little book in his mind of what not to do. Do not leave an ally alone in a room full of rivals. Do not forget to loop back after a meeting to confirm what was agreed, because half of all disputes come from mismatched memories. Do not eat at a table where staff are treated as furniture, because that habit spreads like mildew. Do not promise what depends on a stranger's mercy. Do not be the last to learn a new rule. He reads this book to himself when the day offers a spare corner. The garment district ages him by teaching him to look both close and far at once. Close enough to see a frayed hem on a deal, far enough to know where the shipment is headed after it leaves your dock. He delights in the geometry of it, the way a cart turns a tight circle into a clean angle, the way a phone call turns a tense hour into a normal feed. He finds beauty in the line of a neatly stacked roll. Order is his preferred art form. The streets give him a gallery every day. People come to him now with their own plans and ask him to bless the parts that touch his lanes. He does not hand out yes like candy. He hands out clear instructions. If they follow them, the plan works and they learn to listen. If they do not, the plan limps and they learn to listen later. He is patient with both. Patience is not kindness exactly. It is investment. He owns shares in the calm of tomorrow. There are moments when he stops and takes a private inventory of how far he has come from the boy on the stoop. He still carries bread home when he can, still thanks the elevator man, still respects the clerk. He has a wider map now, more names in his head, a heavier keyring in his pocket. He keeps his step the same. A steady stride tells people that nothing urgent is happening, even when the day is a mess. He arranges things so that the mess does not spread. One night he sits in the back of a quiet cafe after the dinner rush and considers a simple truth. There are men who build their legend by telling stories. There are men who build their legend by making sure there is no story to tell. He has chosen the second path. It suits him. In a city that never stops talking, silence is a rare craft. It takes maintenance and a sense of humor and a good coat for rainy days. He leaves the cafe and walks past racks of coats in a display window. He thinks of how many hands brought those coats from sketch to stitch to store. He thinks of how many small promises had to be kept. Trucks showed up, elevators worked, the right people were called at the right time, and no one lost their temper for longer than a minute. This is what he serves, a fabric made of favors and punctuality, and a calm voice that says, "I will see to it." He does not need to say more. People hear the fullness in the quiet. In this chapter of his life he chooses his tools, a phone with numbers memorized, a car that can circle the island from dawn to dusk, a pocketbook of names better kept in his head than on paper, a set of jokes used like oil canisters, a loyalty to schedules that does not feel rigid but does feel reliable. With these simple things he builds reach. With reach comes the expectation that more will be asked. He does not fear that. He only fears losing the ability to move through the city the way he likes, unnoticed when he wants, present when needed. The sun lifts late on winter mornings and slides down early, and through those short days he keeps the district on time. Men who once doubted him now ask for his time politely. Women who run the true operations let him know when a storm is brewing 2 floors above his pay grade. He thanks them. He moves pieces. The storm hits another roof. By night the sidewalks shine with melted snow and the streets whisper with tires. He rides in his moving office and reviews the next day, a conductor of freight and favors. He is not the loudest man in any room. He is sometimes the quietest, but when a room needs to shift from fuss to function, it looks to him the way a classroom looks to the kid who finished the homework. He nods and assigns small parts. He gives people chances to be their best selves by telling them exactly when and how to do it. They take those chances and feel competent. That is the hook. He sells competence back to a city that runs on performance. People pay for it without feeling the bill slide under their plate. And so a reputation grows, not from stunts, but from days that do not break. The name that started as a joke grows into a description of weather. Tony Ducks walks through storms and arrives dry. He does not think of himself as cunning. He thinks of himself as prepared and well-mannered. He is careful with other people's time and money and pride. He knows that all 3 are currencies that buy more if you spend them with grace. He is learning how to be a boss without looking like one. He will carry this chapter forward into the next, where meetings feel like Sunday socials and cars become rolling offices by design. He will carry his ledger of trust and his small circle of quiet lieutenants and his habit of never raising his voice. He will carry the garment district in his bones, a place where fabric and favors share the same vocabulary. He will carry the phones, the routes, the jokes, and the timing. He will remain the person the day calls when it wants to be better behaved. Chapter 3: Taking the Reins Without Raising the Voice. Power arrives like a quiet guest when the room has been set for it. Anthony senses it before anyone says a word. The work he has done along the avenues has turned into something with weight, and men who once asked favors now ask for direction. He does not rush. He lets the days lengthen and the calls come. He knows that leadership is not taken, it is accepted. Meetings begin to appear on his calendar that look like casual lunches. A back room with a clean tablecloth, a booth where the light is kind to faces. No one calls it a meeting. Schedules simply overlap. The talk starts with weather and trucks and the price of fabric, then drifts to matters of coordination, who handles which neighborhoods, who keeps the peace when a driver has a bad day, who can be counted on to say yes, only when yes can be delivered. Anthony listens so fully that the room grows calm. He answers in short sentences that end troubles rather than continue them. He brings his habit of fairness into rooms that are used to noise. He observes who bristles when the word later is used, and who softens when the word soon is offered. He trades later and soon like chips, careful to back both with action. Men leave his table believing they have won something clear. In truth, they have received clarity. In this city, clarity is more precious than coin and harder to counterfeit. The older guard studies him with a mix of caution and relief. They remember winters when tempers held the wheel. They remember days when a wrong look turned into a week of repairs. Anthony is not built that way. He considers patience a craft and practices it daily. He does not flinch at silence. He lets a pause lengthen until the other person finds their better tone. This becomes his signature, the pause that improves the room. He begins to shape a team with the same touch he uses for schedules, a man who can handle introductions without making introductions feel like obligations, a woman whose ledgers sing the truth in even lines, a driver who never repeats gossip, only coordinates routes, a fixer who knows that the first solution is rarely the best and who will try 3 doors before knocking on the loud one. Anthony gathers them quietly, offers them certainty, and gives them space to do their work without fuss. Not every invitation is accepted. Some men decline with a shrug, some test him. He welcomes both. Those who decline are placed at a distance that still includes warmth. Those who test him are answered with results rather than speeches. A shipment that was due tomorrow arrives tonight. A misunderstanding at a loading dock becomes a handshake before lunch. Skeptics find themselves short on complaints. It is difficult to argue with a day that runs on time. He develops a practice for delicate moments. Begin with respect, continue with facts, conclude with a useful path. He does not correct without offering a next step. He knows that dignity is the true currency of hard men, and that it can be banked if you help them keep it. This is why rooms accept his lead. No one is asked to kneel. Everyone is asked to stand straighter. A friend suggests a dinner near the water on a mild spring night. The guest list is small. The conversation circles an unspoken topic. The family is in need of steadier rhythms. The city is changing. Headlines arrives with more appetite than caution. There is talk of microphones where there used to be none. There is talk of schedules broken by people who confuse prominence with power. From the corridor, the table looks to Anthony without saying his name. He lifts his glass, offers a simple toast to clean work and quiet solutions, and the matter is settled more by tone than by vow. He keeps his home life arranged like a well-swept path. Evenings in a house where the lamps are warm and the yard is tidy. Oyster Bay Cove gives him a buffer from the city's glare. He walks under trees that listen instead of talk, and in that listening he recovers the patience he spends downtown. He reads the paper in a chair that faces a window and thinks about how to keep days humane. He checks lists in his head and shortens them with care. He believes that a leader who is rested is a leader who prevents accidents. Neighbors learn he is a courteous man who waves from his driveway and tips his hat to the mail carrier. He is known for schedules and for a lawn that never looks tired. Children ride bicycles past his fence, and he slows his car for them by habit, not performance. This quiet normalcy is part of his method. Routine is a shield. Predictability is a cloak. The city can tug at both, but only if you let it. He does not. Back in the city, his car becomes his desk. Not yet the grand machine it will become, but a reliable room on wheels with a clean seat and a radio that speaks softly. He uses motion as a way to keep talk honest and to keep people from making theatre. People posture less when the skyline slides. They answer question directly when the next red light is already coming. He learns which routes produce the best decisions and arranges meetings accordingly. When disputes arise within the family, he insists on chairs pulled close and voices set to low. He invites each party to describe the problem in words that would make sense to a clerk, not a poet. Numbers, times, names, promises made, promises kept. He reduces heat by feeding the room facts. Then he adds mercy in doses that keep pride intact. A fine waved here, a warning signed that, an apology scheduled, not demanded. Men who came in with thunder leave with a forecast and a plan. He does not confuse restraint with softness. He knows when a firm line must be drawn. He draws it once and in terms that cannot be mistaken. There will be no headlines from our corner. There will be no stunts that make the week harder than it needs to be. There will be no guests of the house who forget the house rules. He says these things once. He says them in a room that smells of coffee. The room remembers. In union halls he keeps his respect crisp. He knows the stewards by first name and the shop floors by sound. He does not arrive empty-handed, and he does not arrive with promises he cannot keep. He speaks of work days and safety and what happens when schedules slip. He is not a rabble-rouser. He is a custodian of calm. Men who work with their backs straight appreciate a man who takes their time seriously. They return the favor by keeping their end of the street tidy. He adopts a rule about phone calls that keeps his world sane. If a problem can be settled in 2 minutes, settle it. If it requires 10, schedule it. If it requires an hour, do not let it breed in the hallway. Put it in a room, sit down, and end it before the coffee cools. This habit becomes known to everyone around him. They adjust to it because it saves their nerves. Schedules bend toward people who treat time with care. From time to time he attends gatherings where other chairs of other tables compare notes. These are not grand congresses. They are breakfast meetings in corner diners, late suppers in dim restaurants, short walks outside a club while the city hums. He participates with his usual economy. Where he can share a trick without exposing a friend, he does. Where he can learn which routes to avoid in the season to come, he listens. The value is in the exchange of steadiness, knowing that other rooms also keep their voices low. He extends mercy to those who are earnest and exacting to those who are careless. A man who shows up early with clean hands and a clear explanation can expect a path forward. A man who arrives late with a loud voice and a story full of missing numbers will be asked to sit and listen for a while. Over time, people choose which experience they prefer. They shape their behavior accordingly. This is leadership without speeches. Even his humor becomes a tool for balance. A heated morning cools when he observes that a certain elevator runs on a diet of apologies and must be fed early. A tense buyer laughs when Anthony suggests the fabric will behave if spoken to kindly. The laughter takes the air out of fear and gives room to decisions. Gentle sarcasm is his pressure valve. It never stings, it polishes. He begins to keep a mental atlas of loyalty. Who holds a line when wind rises? Who drifts with the first rumor? Who calls him before the fire and who calls after the smoke? He does not punish drifters. He simply allocates trust with the same care he allocates trucks. The right person for the right lane, the right promise for the right day. Errors shrink when assignments fit. There are days of risk. A whisper of a listening ear in a place that should be private. A glimpse of a camera where once there were only curious faces. Anthony tightens routines without announcing that he is tightening them. Windows are shut a little sooner, hallway conversations move to better rooms, cars roll a little longer before they stop. He changes the rhythm but keeps the melody. Outsiders hear only music, insiders feel the new beat and follow it without protest. He inherits responsibilities that once belonged to men who enjoyed theatre. He keeps the responsibilities and discards the theatre. The contrast improves morale. Drivers stop wondering if today will bring a scene. Bookkeepers stop bracing for last-minute flourishes. Partners across town start using his name as a synonym for final and done. This reputation is more than flattery. It is a moat around his schedule. People protect it because it protects them. His evenings at home deepen the discipline that the days demand. Oyster Bay Cove is where he recharges the calm he spends. He takes walks at a pace that lets him hear birds and distant water. He holds a rake, then a pen, then nothing at all for a few minutes, just to practice the art of letting the mind settle. If a decision still feels hot after sunset, he waits until morning. Nearly every morning proves that waiting was wise. He mentors younger men without calling it mentoring. He asks them simple questions that make them feel smart when they answer, and smarter when they realize they have more to learn. What time does your day truly begin? Where did you lose 10 minutes last week? What promise did you make that required someone else to be perfect? The men go home and think about these questions. They return steadier. When the family needs a public face for a private coordination, he is chosen because he does not chase cameras. He attends a wedding, speaks to an uncle, steadies a cousin, makes sure two rival crews leave at different times, and the talk the next day is about how pleasant the music was. This is victory. The best headlines are the ones that never get written. He keeps a personal tally of near headlines and resolves to keep that number high. Small storms arrive and pass. A contractor forgets a promise and tries to bluff. A clerk files a form twice and blames the first filing. A driver buys a drink for the wrong listener and earns himself a talking to. Anthony addresses each ripple at the scale of the mistake. Never more, never less. He believes in proportion the way a tailor believes in fit. If the coat sits right, the wearer carries himself better. If the punishment fits, the lesson holds without breeding resentment. He refines his circle of lieutenants. The bookkeeper gains an assistant with quick eyes. The runner gets a partner who can handle a rough stairwell and a rough question. The warehouseman trains a younger pair of hands to lift without dropping, to stack without leaning, to say good morning even when the morning is not good. Anthony pays attention to how they work together. He is building not just a team, but a temperament that can survive bad weather. His language stays simple even as his reach expands. He talks about routes, schedules, promises, and people by name. He avoids the grand words that turn leaders into caricatures. He does not need to call himself a boss to be us. Others use that word when he is not present, and the rooms they are in nod as if a small problem just solved itself. A late autumn brings longer shadows and a sharper wind. In those months he leans into ritual. The first cup of coffee at the same minute. The first call to the same reliable number. The ride across the bridge timed for a view of water that smooths the mind. Ritual keeps fear in check. It gives hands something to do while the brain chooses the next right step. His people feel it. Their own rituals find rhythm under his. He never forgets the boy he was on the East Harlem stoop. That boy watched first and acted second. The man does the same. He still reads rooms the way you read a clock, with glances that tell the hour and the season. He still honors clerks and porters and elevator men, because their small kindnesses keep large plans from stalling. He still ends days by walking the longest way around the block if it means he will sleep better. Rumors drift through the city of new pressures that will test everyone. He acknowledges them without letting them set his tone. Pressure is weather. You cannot insult the rain into stopping. You can only choose good shoes and a steady stride. He reviews contingencies with his closest people, and then returns to the work of today, because today remains the only lever anyone can pull. At a late supper in a quiet room, he is told plainly that more of the weight now rests on his shoulders. There is no ceremony. There is only a small nod from a man who has carried weight himself. Anthony accepts without changing expression. The work will continue tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, and it will be measured in on time arrivals, in problems that end before they spread, in people who go home feeling seen rather than used. This is the only crown he recognizes. He ends many nights with a ledger of gratitude, 3 names who made the day smoother, 2 problems that taught him something he will use, 1 detail he missed and will not miss again. Gratitude keeps ambition from turning into appetite. It keeps a leader human. It reminds him that the machine runs on more than orders. It runs on goodwill that must be earned again tomorrow. By winter he has taken the reins in truth, though few outside the right rooms would know it. The family is steadier, the district breathes easier, calls are returned faster, meetings end soon, schedules suffer fewer dents. He sits in his moving office, looks at the city lights sliding by, and thinks of how keeping the peace is a craft like tailoring. Fit the plan to the person, hem the day, do not draw attention to the stitch. What he aims to preserve is simple, work that feels fair, promises that do not limp, rooms where the air allows men to be their better selves. He is not interested in empire, he is interested in reliability. He is interested in evenings where people go home tired in the right way, with the pleasant ache of good labor and the comfort of knowing tomorrow will be similar and manageable. He knows the next chapter will ask him to turn the car into a true office and to use motion as a cloak. He knows that attention is a tax and that he must learn to pay less of it. He knows that the city's ears are growing longer and that the only protection that truly works is the one he has always relied on: calm, courtesy, precision. He can bring those into any season. He can teach them to others by example. He closes the day by setting his watch 5 minutes fast, not to fool himself, but to give time a cushion. He places his phone face down. He breathes in the quiet of the house and the soft stir of trees. Tomorrow will bring its usual parade and its unusual tests. He will answer both with the same demeanor: a nod, a plan, a polite refusal when needed, a firm yes when earned. The reins feel right in his hands because he holds them the way he holds everything: lightly, intentionally, without drama. Chapter 4: The Jaguar Office That Never Parked. The car is a room that moves, and that is the point. The city loves a man who stays in motion. Roads are the safest hallways. Streetlights are the lamps in a corridor that stretches from river to river. Anthony settles into a routine where the day begins with a door closing and the soft sound of the engine agreeing to serve. The car becomes his desk, his lobby, his waiting room, and his window. He keeps the seats clean and the air mild. He keeps the radio low enough to measure the hour without interrupting a thought. He keeps the map in his head and the calendar in his voice. A moving office does more than hide a man. It relaxes the others who sit inside it. Rooms make people perform. Cars make people confess. In a car, there is always another turn to take and another light to judge, so the talk finds its natural pace. A man speaks in sentences that match the length of the blocks. A silence arrives when the bridge opens to the sky and the water calms the nerves. You can say no in a car and it sounds like mercy. You can say yes and it sounds like a favor from the city itself. He chooses drivers the way careful men choose doctors. They tend to the ride. They watch the mirrors. They know how to be present without being a presence. They keep the speed even and the routes varied. They accept that the back seat is a library. You do not shout in a library. You speak in a way that lets ideas find their shape without being pushed. When a driver is new, Anthony listens to the rhythm of the lane changes the way a watchmaker listens to a tick. The drivers learn his tempo as a band learns a conductor. The car phone is a marvel that he treats like a candle in a church. You do not waste its light. You use it for calls that must be made now, not later. He keeps calls brief and practical. He never asks a man to repeat a detail, because a moving office is built on the respect of not making someone say the same thing twice. The car phone connects islands of responsibility, from union hall to cutting floor to job site to quiet house on a tree-lined street. The signal binds the day together. Business that once took 3 rooms and a dozen people now fits into a sequence of short rides and courteous talks. He can meet a foreman on a corner where the coffee is decent and the traffic hides the words. He can glide past a warehouse to sense its mood without stepping inside. He can pull to the curb outside a diner where a man waits with a ledger in his head and a question in his pocket. The city becomes a filing system. Blocks labeled by memory, intersections that mean something, landmarks that hold decisions the way paper holds ink. He finds that movement protects clarity. A conversation that threatens to swell into drama is softened by a turn onto a quieter avenue. An argument that might have broken a table is drained of anger when the windshield shows a skyline so steady it insists on reasonable voices. Even the awkward business of declining a request becomes less sharp when the car gathers a little speed and the listener leans back and accepts that today is not the day. He keeps to simple rules. Do not take the same road at the same hour 2 days in a row. Do not let a meeting go longer than the drive to the next light. Do not keep a man in the car who does not respect the hush that makes deals clean. Do not let the car become a stage for cruelty, because cruelty lingers like smoke. The rules are not written anywhere. They live in the crew that orbits him, and in the way his hand rests gently on the armrest when a point has been made and the talk should end. A moving office works because it is a human-scale machine. People fit into it as they are. A nervous buyer who speaks too fast calms down by the second intersection. A tough clerk who guards every word loosens up when the city provides a new view every minute. A driver with a chip on his shoulder remembers his better self when the man in the back seat listens more than he speaks. Anthony uses this effect to keep the peace. He uses it to keep the schedule. He uses it to keep himself from becoming the kind of boss who mistakes posture for power. He is aware that the city adapts as quickly as he does. New attentions arrive in strange forms. A reporter who haunts a sidewalk. A patrol car that lingers at the end of a block longer than habit would explain. A face that appears too often in different neighborhoods with the same casual shrug. Attention is a tax, and the car helps him pay less of it. Still, he knows that hidden ears can learn to ride as well as drivers do. He answers this by changing lanes in more ways than van. Routes shift with the season. Bridges become breakfast rides in spring. Tunnels become evening cloaks in winter. Uptown loops soothe tense mornings. Downtown spirals settle late afternoons. He thinks of the city as a hive with many entrances, and he trains himself to use all of them. A man should never be forced to walk through the same door twice when he has other options. The more doors you know, the fewer surprises you meet. Inside the car, he practices a steady tone that becomes his signature, firm without edge, patient without slack. He speaks in paragraphs that end with a path forward. He notices that people imitate the tone of the last voice they heard. By giving them a calm voice to echo, he improves the next room they enter. He thinks of this not as manipulation, but as stewardship. If the city must hum, let it hum in a key that does not wear people out. Because the car is his office, his other offices grow smaller. He keeps an apartment where the chairs are well kept and the blinds close cleanly. He sees fewer visitors there. He does more work in motion. He meets more people for short walks under awnings and under trees. He sits at fewer tables where the main course is theatre. An actor must hold a stage. A custodian of schedules must keep the aisles clear and the exits known. Some afternoons turn into roaming councils. A cousin slides in at the curb on Madison and speaks of a box of trouble that arrived wrapped as a favour. He listens and unwraps it with questions that show where the string should have been. A union friend joins at a light on 10th and brings word of a foreman whose temper has started to fray the morning shift. Anthony assigns a quiet visit and a reminder wrapped in respect. A buyer steps in outside a tie shop west of the park and hints at a dispute over fabric that was promised twice to 2 different rooms. Anthony untangles it by returning one promise to the shelf and moving the other along with a small gift. None of these tasks takes longer than a few song lengths on the radio. Each one would have burned an hour in a static room. He discovers that a moving office is a kind of school. Men come in tents and leave with homework. Call this person. Take that route. Apologize to that crew chief before lunch. Bring a specific number tomorrow instead of a story that asks me to guess. The city loves people who do their homework. The city forgives a lot if the work is done clean. His riders learn the pattern. They return in a week with fewer problems and a lighter step. He also discovers that the car holds memory. The back seat is where a plan was born that saved a week of payroll. The passenger side is where a young lieutenant admitted he had overreached and asked for a way back into good standing. The middle of the bench is where a rumour was tested and found thin. He does not dwell on these moments, but he honours them with small routines. The doors open slowly, people are greeted by name. The day is measured by kindness first, decision second. There is a quiet danger to comfort. In a well-tended routine, a man can forget that new eyes are always watching and new ears are learning to make sense of old tricks. Anthony keeps a corner of his mind set aside for that thought. He rotates drivers, he changes the car when the paint begins to feel like a uniform. He speaks as if someone else will have to repeat his words to an honest clerk someday and make them sound like decent business. He keeps a discipline of behaving well, not to impress a court, but to impress his own sense of order. Even with care, the world sneaks closer. A device in a place no thinks to look, a line that carries his voice where it does not belong. He senses that the air feels different, as if walls have grown ears, and he shifts again. He reduces the amount of talk that belongs to yesterday. He increases the talk that belongs to the next hour. He practices an old habit with fresh intensity. Say only what you must to the person who can use it well. Use names sparingly. Use details as gifts, not as gossip. Movement helps, but only if the mind moves too. The car allows him to manage more than one world with the same steady hand. Labour in the morning, construction at noon, family business in the afternoon, the neighbours who keep life humane in the evening. He arranges the day in arcs. Each arc touches the car like a spoke to a hub. The spokes are strong because the hub is quiet. It is not a throne. It is something more useful, a well-oiled wheel. Humour survives the confines of leather and glass. A driver slides a look in the mirror when a passenger tries to impress the back seat with words that mean nothing. Anthony lets the silence sit until the man hears how empty his sentences sound. Then he offers a small joke about a certain elevator that eats speeches and only digests schedules. Laughter makes the point without a bruise. The passenger nods and starts over with facts. The ride proceeds in peace. He discovers a pleasure in the city that only constant motion reveals. There is a corner where a bakery opens its windows just as the sun clears the rooftops. There is a turn where a certain church bell makes the concrete feel old in the good way. There is a stretch of river where the wind always tastes like iron and plans. He collects these passages as other men collect wines. They colour his days and soften the work. A moving office should be a place where a man's shoulders come down an inch, not up. Not all rides are calm. Some are surgical. A call comes in with the news that a rumour has grown legs and started to run. The car becomes a scalpel. He moves to the first corner where the rumour took a breath. He removes the wrong detail and replaces it with the right was. He visits the second corner where pride is involved and wraps it in a bandage of courtesy. He stops at the third corner where a schedule was endangered and mends it with a simple swap. The rumour cannot run on repaired streets. By late afternoon the day is healthy again. He refuses to let the car separate him from the people whose hands keep these lanes honest. He steps out for short walks on loading docks and shakes hands with men whose names deserve to be remembered. He knows the names of porters, elevator men, clerks and sweepers. The car is his tool, not his throne. Throned men drift into carelessness. Working men return to the basics each morning. There are times when the car sits quietly in a line of traffic, and he takes those minutes as gifts. He looks at faces crossing the street and studies posture. A decisive stride indicates a person who will keep a promise. A worried neck signals a person who needs clearer instructions. A laugh that reaches the eyes signals a person who can be trusted to calm a room. He keeps a mental ledger of people he has not met yet. When they finally enter his day, he is already halfway to understanding them. As months pass, the car's routes start to resemble a ritual more than a routine. He circles past certain corners at the same light, not to be predictable, but to confirm that the city still answers to the same quiet rules. Goods move when you respect the hands that lift them. Crews work when their hours are honoured. Meetings end well when everyone keeps their pride. He notes any shift in these rules the way a captain notes tide and wind. A small change now can prevent a larger problem later. There is a day when he realizes that the car has become the safest place to speak plainly, and the least safe place to speak carelessly. It is a paradox he accepts and commands at once. Plain words, careful topics, clear tasks, limited audience. He makes lists that can be done without the burden of explaining why to people who do not need to know why. This is not secrecy for its own sake. It is focus. He finds a kind of moral sense in it. Do not drag unneeded ears into rooms where they would only become nervous. He is not alone in this moving enterprise. Trusted lieutenants learn to signal when a message belongs in a seat and when it belongs on a sidewalk. They learn to use the rhythm of the route, a short point at the next red light, a longer plan on the ride along the river, a single name spoken on a block where engines drown out everything but truth. The lieutenants become conductors of their own small routes. The whole organization begins to breathe as one. The city waits for mistakes. It always has and always will. A bug placed with craft, a line spliced with care, a voice plucked out of the air and placed somewhere it does not belong. He cannot control the waiting, he can only control the conduct. He keeps the talk domestic when possible. He keeps the tone civil always. He keeps the work specific and modest. If the day is ever replayed by unfriendly ears, he wants it to sound like what it was. Men moving goods, men keeping schedules, men trying to make a complicated town run a little smoother. Night rides become a separate chapter in this practice. The city at night is a softer animal. The routes are clearer, the lights are gentler, the conversations are slower and more reflective. He uses these hours to check on people who have earned his care. A driver with a new child, a clerk with a sick mother, a steward who took the heat for a call that Anthony asked him to make. The car glides, and gratitude settles into the cushions. The organization becomes heavier in the good way with bonds that cannot be faked. He fields requests for the car that he declines without embarrassment. Some want to ride just to be seen. Others want a tour to feel important. He offers coffee in a diner, and a short walk instead. Work belongs to those who need to work. Theatre belongs elsewhere. Over time, the right people fill the seats, and the wrong people learn to keep their distance. The office stays useful because it never becomes a prop. When the day threatens to slide toward chaos, he returns to fundamentals. Who is affected? What is due? Which promise came first? How do we make today end well for the greatest number of people without breaking anything that matters? In the car, these questions feel answerable. In a conference room, they feel like a test. His lieutenants come to prefer the car for this reason. They bring problems to him in motion, because motion implies solution. He respects the machine as he respects the work. Tires rotated, fluids checked, seats cleaned at dusk. The car cannot complain, so he imagines what it would say if it could. Keep me honest. Do not carry lies. Do not make me witness something I would not tell my own children about. The imagined rules keep his heart steady when the outside world knocks with a heavy hand. The day arrives when the car carries conversations that the world will one day weigh. He does not know the shape of that weighing. He only knows that he can control the shape of his sentences, measured, humane, focused on keeping people whole and days on time. If the world hears them later, it will hear a man trying to keep a big machine from shaking apart. That is what he tells himself when the air feels crowded. He learns to step out of the car precisely when someone else needs to be seen in it. A lieutenant rides alone to practice the tone. A steward takes a short loop to pass along a narrow message. The office becomes a shared instrument. He finds pride in that. An instrument is better than a stage. An instrument invites others to play the tune. The city hears the music and relaxes into its chores. There are small acts of grace that the car makes possible. A lift for an old neighbour to a doctor. A drop at a church door on a rainy night. A surprise stop at a school fair where a niece performs a small dance. These moments do more than keep a man human. They teach his crew that a schedule is not a cage, it is a canvas. There is always room for a line of colour if you plan with care. He holds to the belief that motion reveals character. He watches how a man enters and exits the car. A careful shut of the door signals respect for other people's days. A glance at the driver with a word of thanks signals humility. A pause before speaking signals a brain that knows listening is the first task. He takes mental notes. He adjusts assignments. The organization grows around these judgments like a tree around good light. The Jaguar office that never parked becomes a story people tell with a mix of admiration and suspicion. He shrugs at both. Admiration can make a man lazy. Suspicion can make a man brittle. He chooses neither. He chooses the middle lane that he chose when he was a boy. Quiet steadiness. Daily decisions. Courtesy as a default. He lets other people argue about the legend while he keeps the roots working. In the end, a car is only a car. It cannot save a man from every storm, and it cannot carry him past every ear that wants to borrow his words. Anthony knows this. He uses the car not as a shield but as a tool that suits his nature. Keep moving. Keep talking the tone that reduces harm. Keep promises in view and ego out of the way. If the world listens, let it hear a man doing a difficult job with restraint. If the world does not listen, all the better. He will be home on time. He finishes a long day with the engine whispering and the sky folding into night. The car drifts along a quiet street where the trees bow slightly as if to say well done. He opens the door and steps into the small sounds of a house that prefers peace. Tomorrow the car will be ready again. Tomorrow the city will ask for more calm than it deserves. Tomorrow he will give it what he can, from a seat that sees everything and claims nothing. Chapter 5. 5 chairs were city soft thunder. Power in New York is often described as a storm, but Anthony thinks of it as weather that listens. The city holds 5 chairs at the center of a large table that no one admits exists, and yet everyone sets with care. Each chair speaks for a house with its own habits and history. The chairs do not shout. They bend the seasons. They decide when a neighborhood breathes easy and when it holds its breath. Anthony enters this system not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker, a keeper of tone. He brings with him the garment district's good manners, the driver's patience, and the belief that leadership is a kind of housekeeping. The first lesson is that the table is not a place, it is a moving agreement. Sometimes it lives in a restaurant that values privacy. Sometimes it lives in a walk along a river. Sometimes it lives in a short ride where two chairs share a car and the city hums in the background like a choir that knows the chorus by heart. The point is not ceremony. The point is pacing. If a matter is not urgent, it waits for the right light, the right hour, the right room. Urgency is taxed heavily in this city. Patience pays dividends. He keeps his voice set to low when he speaks among equals. Each chair carries the pride of an entire structure. Each chair guards a history of slights and favours. It is easy to set off alarms. Anthony avoids the trap of cleverness. He trades in clarity instead. We will keep this lane open for a time. You will settle this dispute where it started, not where it wandered. We will not invite headlines into rooms that feed so many families. His sentences land like a folded napkin, clean, simple, ready for use. There are alignments and rivalries that play out like weather fronts. A warm wind from one house meets a cold gust from another, and the air in between becomes tricky. He studies these patterns the way he studied truck routes. What looks like a conflict might really be a scheduling error between men whose tempers rise with the afternoon sun. What seems like a principled fight can be a thin disguise for a payroll problem or an old boast that needs to be retired with grace. He refuses to be pulled by noise. He reads the barometer and moves the day toward calm. The city is changing. New ears learn to listen where once ears were deaf. New eyes learn to see where once shadows were thick. Anthony accepts that the theatre of loud leadership is an expired license. He argues quietly for the civic value of order. Men who run districts are natural custodians. They keep small storms from rolling into schools and kitchens. They keep arguments from turning into nights of sirens. He makes this case not with slogans, but with outcomes. Streets that keep their schedules. Payrolls that arrive before their worry. Corners that do not attract the kind of attention that makes mothers anxious. Rumour travels faster than transit. A wire pulled through an office. A friend of a friend who has new questions. A face that lingers too long at the end of a corridor. The table responds with what it knows best. Procedures, routines, consistency that looks like boredom to outsiders and feels like oxygen to men who work. Anthony urges small corrections rather than grand purges. He knows that panic breaks more than pressure does. He shortens meetings, he widens the lanes for couriers who bring good information. He asks that every message be one the messenger would repeat in front of an honest clerk. This standard removes a surprising amount of trouble. He respects the other chairs without imitating them. Each has a flavour. One prefers distance and princely rules, another lives on gravel and grievance, a third wishes to be admired, a fourth likes problems that can be solved with a laugh and an extra plate of dinner. Anthony offers a fifth option, efficiency as courtesy. If you leave my people room to keep their schedules, I will leave yours room to keep their pride. Over time, this exchange becomes habit. Habit becomes custom. Custom becomes a shield. He creates channels for the small frictions that otherwise grow into hard edges. A union steward has a number to call that is answered by a human voice before the second ring. A buyer with a sudden need can send a note through a trusted runner and receive an answer before his coffee cools. A crew chief who feels slighted knows there is a chair where he can sit for 5 minutes and be heard without spectacle. None of this is grand. All of it is preventative. Softer days require invisible scaffolding. The commission by any quiet name still requires someone to whisper the weather. Anthony accepts the role of quiet weatherman. When a gust from Wenborough threatens to lift tarps in another, he suggests sandbags made of courtesies and favours. When a warm front of optimism encourages overpromising, he reminds the room that promises are better when they are humble. The city's patience is a reservoir. It load my field with small acts of competence before anyone tries to draw down a bucket. He resists the lure of showy solutions. Oversized gestures invite oversized responses. Instead, he prefers a series of small, right choices. Move this meeting to morning. Add this driver to that route. Ask the clerk for a second set of eyes. Send a basket to that hall before the rumor becomes a fact. These quiet insertions of care keep the machine from grinding. People learn to expect that the day will end close to where it began. Calm breeds gratitude. Gratitude breeds cooperation. Cooperation keeps cops and cameras looking elsewhere for entertainment. There are, inevitably, discussions about discipline, a promise broken, a worker who lets pride speak before the brain does, a corner where men begin to act as if house rules are decorations and not anchors. Anthony brings proportion to these talks. If the garment is torn, mend only the tear. Do not cut a new suit out of fear. If a correction is needed, apply it where it teaches rather than where it humiliates. The room does not always agree, but the room has trouble arguing with results. His districts remain orderly, his crews remain loyal, his name remains associated with completion rather than conflict. A winter sweeps in with a particular bitterness. Snow piles at curbs and temper shortens. Schedules turn brittle. The chairs meet more often in small numbers, they agree on allowances. A late truck will not be read as disrespect. A quiet favour will be extended to an old rival if it keeps a sidewalk from becoming a stage. Anthony offers a useful phrase. Let us aim for a season with no headlines. The phrase becomes a touchstone, a measure men can carry in their pockets. When they succeed, the city is simply a little kind for a while. He thinks often of the cost of publicity. The city is a theatre that loves a scene. A scene loves a name to hang its hat on. He avoids the coat rack entirely. He coaches his lieutenants to speak as if they are clerks handling receipts. He urges them to move as if they are porters returning borrowed chairs. He wants the press to look elsewhere, not out of fear, but because flash burns energy that ought to be spent on schedules, safety, and the right kind of pride. The chairs have their own kind of humour, dry and essential. One night, a plan that had required 10 small favours and 3 short apologies goes off without a hitch. A chair across the table says that they have invented the first silent parade. Anthony smiles and says parades are fine, as long as they end before anyone looks out the window. The line travels. For weeks men say silent parade to mean a plan that did not waste time or courage. Language becomes a tool for morale. He notices that succession is a constant background murmur. Age does not ask permission in this business. Winters grow heavier, eyes grow tired, hands that were once quick with numbers and names begin to fumble. Anthony does not gloat, he prepares. He trains men to keep rooms tidy, to take meetings that feel like lunches, to use humour that wipes oil from a gear without slowing the machine. He believes that true continuity requires kindness. People will follow discipline for a while, they will follow decency longer. Labour and construction remain the arteries through which nerves can travel to the table. He monitors them the way a captain watches a compass. If a site begins to run hot, he arranges shade. If a hall starts to simmer with talk that tastes like grievance, he adds sugar in the form of attention and a small correction to a schedule. He reminds the chairs that 1,000 paychecks delivered on time will settle more anger than 1,000 speeches. The room nods. The room remembers. The room sends men out with lists rather than slogans. Sometimes temper wants its day. A man leans forward and asks for a hammer when a file would do. Another chair suggests that a message be sent in a way that would echo too far and too long. Anthony does not scold. He asks for the result they truly want and then draws a shorter line to it. The room exhales. The hammer goes back into the toolbox. The file comes out. The mark is made. The day survives. He has a private rule for himself when he sits with power. If the room remembers your kindness, they will forgive your firmness. If the room only remembers your firmness, they will seek opportunities to mishear you. He keeps this in mind when he vetoes an idea that would have pleased hotheads. He keeps it in mind when he approves a plan that will never be thanked because it will never be noticed. He prefers the kind of victory that lets a city sleep. Sleep is the truest applause. There are also the politics of outsiders. City Hall has its seasons and its fashions. Uniforms have their own rivalries and ambitions. Business leaders float in and out with projects that want lanes kept clear and hands kept off. Anthony treats these as weather too. He meets what must be met. He refuses what must be refused. He arranges what can be arranged without bending his own rules. Above all, he insists that his people treat every outsider as a person with a schedule and a pride. This earns him quiet credit in rooms he does not enter. Quiet credit spends well. A summer brings an uneasy prosperity. Money arrives faster than thought. Some forget the house rules when pockets feel heavy. Anthony counters with rigor wrapped in humour. He reminds men that fast cash is like a tailwind. It feels like skill until the first corner. Skill is what gets you through the corner. He pairs the reminder with tiny reforms. 2 sign-offs for any plan that moves too quickly, a cooling hour between an idea and a commitment. The reforms save more than they slow. He maintains the practice of praising the right people at the right scale. A porter who kept an elevator running during a week of long moves receives a personal visit and a new set of boots. A clerk who caught a duplicate order and prevented a turf dispute receives a note that names the favour and thanks her by name. The room cannot run without the small gears, and the table cannot keep its balance without people who feel seen. Gratitude is a budget item, carefully spent and never zeroed out. On certain nights the city sounds like soft thunder. It is not a warning, it is a reminder that a million lives move at once, and that any system that helps them move with fewer collisions is a public service, whether or not the public would say so. Anthony sits in his moving office, watches the avenue flash by in measured beats of light, and checks the ledger in his head. Not of money, though money matters, a ledger of avoided catastrophes. He imagines writing in its columns, an argument that did not become a feud, a delay that did not become a collapse, a rumour that did not become a headline. He balances that ledger more carefully than any cashier. He never forgets that the table holds history, names that matter, families that stretch back through decades of favours and grief. He treats history as a weight that must be held without letting it press the present flat. He will not be the man who adds a dramatic chapter when an epilogue would do. He aims for a book that ends with people quietly getting on with their days. Readers do not applaud such endings, but people sleep better after them. The tone he sets begins to bleed outward. Runners speak more politely in hallways. Drivers wave more often at the men who direct traffic. Stewards take the time to explain policies in plain words rather than layered code. The city notices in the way cities notice. Lines stay shorter, tempers last fewer minutes, radios carry fewer siren songs. The weather feels altered by a degree or two, and a degree or two is the difference between storm and shower. As autumn returns, he reviews what has been kept and what has been learned. The 5 chairs have held steady. The table remains a moving agreement that keeps neighbourhoods from falling into disorder. The city, for all its appetite for drama, has been made to accept a quieter tempo. He knows this will not last forever. Nothing in New York lasts forever except the need to start again tomorrow. He is ready. He has the tools, a calm voice, a car that moves, a team that respects small rules, a habit of saying no kindly and yes with exactness. He closes the chapter by reminding himself that soft thunder is the best forecast a leader can hope to deliver. Not silence, which is unnatural in a city. Not lightning, which is wasteful. Soft thunder that rolls somewhere far off while people sit on stoops and feel safe enough to finish their stories and go to bed. If his hand on the wheel has helped keep the storm at that distance, then the day was well spent. He sets his watch a few minutes ahead, the old cushion that makes mornings kinder, and goes home. The city hums, the chairs rest, the table holds. Chapter 6. Tapes, Transcripts, and Late Autumn in Manhattan. The first chill of late autumn sharpens the city and makes every sound carry a little farther. Anthony feels it in the way doors close and in the way men clear their throats before speaking. The wind comes off the river with a taste of iron and news. The moving office still circles the avenues, steady as ever, yet something unseen travels with it now, like a draft that slips under a well-fitted door. He keeps his habits clean. He keeps his tone level. He reminds himself that order is a coat you wear inside and out. There is talk of ears in the air, not the human kind, the other kind, the kind that never coughs, never blinks, never grows bored. He feels the world becoming curious in new ways and answers with older disciplines. Say less, be kinder, make short calls, use names only when kindness requires them, speak of schedules, not gossip. Even as he adjusts, he continues to move, because motion frees the mind from pride and panic. The car glides, the city hums, the day obeys. It happens the way such things always do, not with a trumpet but with a tap. A fact arrives and sits down as if it has always had a chair. Somewhere a device has been working harder than a dozen nosy neighbours. Somewhere a voice that should have faded into traffic has been collected, trimmed, typed and stacked. The word tap becomes tape because someone prefers syllables that carry weight. Anthony learns this with the same expression he uses for weather. You prepare for rain even if the morning sky looks friendly. He reviews the weeks and months that led here and takes a private inventory. He finds many errands that sounded like housework, many talks that sounded like maintenance, many instructions that sounded like courtesy. He also finds moments where a sentence could be misunderstood if printed in a cold room by men who do not like the smell of coffee and streets. He cannot unlive those moments. He can only meet them standing up, with the spine he has practiced since boyhood. Friends arrive with faces that try to be unreadable. They bring suggestions, some wise, some hot, all born of concern. He hears them and keeps his pace. The worst mistakes are made by men who sprint when a steady walk would arrive on time. He does not change his coat because of rumours. He changes his gloves. He keeps the work humane. He keeps the errands exact. He asks for receipts in the language of kindness. He is determined that if the city hears him, it will hear a man acting like a custodian, not a showman. The season advances and the leaves go down in a rush. Buildings look older without their shade. The car rides feel longer under bare branches. The radio speaks of cases and charges in the cautious tone that announcers use when they want to sound like adults in a room full of excited children. Names float. The word commission floats too. It has the flavour of a history class taught by a man who enjoyed nicknames. Anthony hears his own name in the same breath as words that turn days into calendars. He nods at the windshield and keeps the speed even. The letter arrives with the authority of a church bell. Grand matters printed in black on white, terms that turn weather into winter. Indictment is a word that sits heavy on a desk, heavier still in a kitchen. He reads what must be read. He notes the scenes the paper believes it has captured. He looks for himself in the paragraphs and finds a version that feels like a sketch, bold lines without shading. A man learns quickly how he looks to strangers. He takes that knowledge and folds it like a handkerchief for future use. Lawyers become part of the daily crew, which means the car must make room for a different kind of patience. These are people who measure their days in pages and in steps from one marble hallway to another. He respects the craft even as he misses the simple arithmetic of freight and schedules. He adjusts his stance, as a driver adjusts for a new road surface. He listens to the advice he should hear and files the rest. He answers questions carefully, in the same tone he uses with stewards and clerks. Facts first. Mercy where possible. No drama unless the room asks for a story to stay human. There is a strange kindness in long corridors lined with portraits of men who like their collars stiff. The kindness is this. They teach you to lower your voice. They teach you to move with intent. They teach you that time changes shape in these buildings. A minute takes a quarter hour, an hour takes a day. Anthony learns the pace and decides to remain himself within it. He tips the staff, he greets the guards, he makes way for clerks carrying boxes like newborns. He keeps his steps even, because even steps steady the hands. News finds new appetites in late autumn. Cameras are everywhere and nowhere. A reporter asks a question with the same face he would use to ask the time. Anthony declines to add speed to their day. The logic is simple. If you want the city to lower its shoulders, you must not lift yours. He walks past microphones as if moving through rain. Let the drops fall where they must. Keep the coat closed, keep the hat low, keep the schedule. Inside the rooms where strategy is discussed, he returns to basics. Identify the truth you can state plainly. Identify the stories that must resist decoration. Identify the people who will be asked to say what they saw and help them remember the work as work. He knows that men love fables, and that fables grow antlers under pressure. He prefers ledgers. He prefers names and times and receipts. When memory wobbles, he repairs it with kindness, not with fear. Kindness makes truer witnesses than fear ever will. Court calendars acquire his mornings and sometimes his afternoons. Benches become familiar. The smell of paper and old wood becomes a second climate. He studies the ritual, the rise, the sit, the murmur like a sea that never warms. He does not confuse ritual with doom. Ritual is a way for nervous people to move through hard days without falling apart. He borrows that use. He stands when told and sits when told and thanks the deputy who keeps a lid on the small chaos that follows every break. He finds grace notes where others miss them. A court officer who lends a pen to a young clerk with shaky hands. A clerk who corrects a caption so that families will not be embarrassed when the paper arrives at their door. A janitor who polishes a scuffed rail until it looks like good manners again. The city is always made better by people who do their jobs with pride. He collects their names as if they were stitches in a coat that must not split at the shoulder. His crew manages the outside world with the same loyalty they once reserved for shipments and routes. They pilot the moving office between appearances. They guard his quiet without turning it into isolation. They keep the daily business from fraying. Bookkeepers continue to sing the numbers in neat lines. Drivers continue to wave at each other and at the men who direct traffic around the courts. A life under pressure needs these proofs that the ordinary still holds. Idle hours appear like puddles that never dry. Waiting becomes half the job. Waiting outside judges' chambers. Waiting for a document to be stamped by a hand that has stamped too many. Waiting while lawyers confer like chess players who have seen every opening, yet must choose where anyway. Anthony uses waiting as exercise. He keeps his mind tidy. He inventories duties. He writes imaginary thank you notes in his head. He asks himself who worked well today and who needs a word tomorrow. Waiting can spoil a man. He refuses to be spoiled. The transcripts arrive like winter birds, plain on the outside and sharp on the inside. Pages full of voices turned into type. He reads them with the same attention he would give to a bill of lading, not because he is charmed by his own words, but because he respects the power of arrangement. A sentence moved from noon to night becomes a stranger. A word that once bent like willow becomes iron when set in a column. He refuses to argue with ink. He answers it by strengthening his posture and narrowing his focus. Jokes become medicine in the halls. Not cruel jokes, small ones that return colour to a face. A lawyer complains that time is a trickster in these buildings, and Anthony says time is a clerk in comfortable shoes who never runs. A deputy groans about elevators, and Anthony says the building is growling because it skipped breakfast. Laughter resets shoulders prevent errors, errors bring storms. He will take laughter. There is a meeting in a small room with a window that pretends to be generous. Men speak softly, as they do when they know the walls carry stories later. Strategy is discussed in terms of kindness and restraint. We will not create enemies by being clever. We will not imagine allies where none exist. We will not trade a month's peace for a day of noise. Anthony repeats the rules he has always used and finds they fit here too. Proportion, courtesy, precision. He spends evenings in a quieter house, the lamps a little lower, the yard still tidy. Oyster Bay Cove wraps him in ordinary things. A rake, a kettle, the sound of wind at the window. He tends to his calm like a man tends a garden before frost. He knows that tomorrow will ask him to sit still under lights that try to make a person look like a headline. He answers that by sleeping on time and waking early. He irons his own shirt to remind himself that control begins with small tasks. Reports of allies and rivals come to him in measured doses. Some people grow careful and betten. Some grow loud and smaller. He neither judges nor imitates. He keeps to his lane, which is the lane of delivery. Even now, especially now, he delivers. Meetings happen on time, goods move without friction, families who count on schedules find that the calendars still behave. He makes sure of it through his lieutenants, who understand that a steady city is its own kind of defense. Winter creeps closer, and with it the knowledge that days inside these halls will grow longer. He buys better shoes. He thanks the porter who keeps the floor honest. He learns which bench will spare his back. He stops arguing with the clock and instead chooses minutes to own. This minute I will read, that minute I will breathe. The next minute I will ask a useful question in a voice meant for kitchens and stoops, not stages. These choices keep him from fraying into the kind of man he vowed not to become. Observers mistake calm for defeat. They mistake patience for emptiness. They mistake courtesy for lack of strength. Anthony allows the mistakes to stand. Correction would only feed a story that is not his to tell. He knows his work. Keep harm low, keep mercy high. Keep promises visible, keep pride at a temperature that does not boil the day. Even in a room where every ear is turned to the wall, a man can keep that work. When the first day of formal proceedings begins, he dresses like a clerk. The tie is tidy. The suit fits like respect. He walks into the room the way he would walk into a union hall, with the belief that people are less dangerous when they feel seen. The room is not warm, but it is not cold either. It is curious and stern, and full of strangers who are being asked to play roles they may not enjoy. He gives them nothing to resent, he gives them nothing to adore, he gives them a man who sits straight and listens. The talk is dense and the tempo is slow. Lawyers assemble timelines like train sets. Witnesses recall winters and summers as if the seasons were gears. Words pile up like snow, each flake harmless, until you feel the weight of the hour. Anthony stays present by naming objects in his mind: pen, table, rail, light. Then he names people in his heart: the driver who took the long route to avoid a corner where tempers often grew tall, the clerk who found an error before it made enemies, the porter who carried an extra chair so that a meeting could end politely. He holds these people like anchors. At recess he walks hallways that smell of paper and polished wood. He nods at faces he has seen for weeks now. They return the nod because decent behavior becomes the only luxury in places like this. A reporter makes a guess at his thoughts. He sidesteps the trap with a sentence about the weather. Weather is the oldest language in New York. It turns conversation into something everyone can carry without harm. Days pile, each wood a hill taken at a steady march. There are small victories that look like nothing to the outside world. A motion granted because a point was made without heat. A line of type corrected so that a title does not wound. A schedule kept so that a child at home still sees a familiar silhouette near dinner. Anthony collects these and uses them to power the next morning. There are also small losses that must be carried without complaint. A rumor that will not die, a page that refuses to be read as intended. He carries those too, but he does not let them set the tone. He keeps humor close by, like a pocket knife that opens letters rather than cuts rope. One afternoon the elevator stops between floors. The box full of suits and nerves holds its breath. Anthony nods to the panel and says the building is reminding everyone to practice patience. The deputy laughs first, then the rest join. The doors open as if they approve of the joke. Everyone steps out feeling human again. Friends ask him if he fears the outcome. He answers them with the only thing he believes in. I fear losing my manners. I fear letting pressure make me unkind. Outcomes are weather, manners are choice. He keeps that choice alive even when the talk turns to years and decades, to fates and labels. A man cannot engineer tomorrow, but he can govern the way he wears his coat today. The season turns colder. There is a morning when the first true frost paints the edges of railings and the breath of everyone on the sidewalk becomes a small cloud. The city looks like a held note. Inside, the case moves like a river that is slow but sure. In such rivers you do not swim against the current. You angle and you cross. You find the bank and you walk. He walks. The day of decision finalizes the air. Rooms feel smaller. Voices sound like they were practiced late into the night. He takes his seat and sets his hands in his lap as if they were holding a calm instrument. He listens as the words are read that turn months of waiting into a single line that points forward. The room registers a shift that has been long in coming. A man hears his own name and feels the weight the way iron feels weight. It is not a surprise. Surprises belong to people who have not been paying attention. Sentencing is a separate mountain. The numbers are large when framed as years. They are larger still when measured in chairs and kitchens and small daily joys. Anthony hears the figure as if it were weather that has decided to settle in for a long stay. He filed this possibility away for months. Now he unpacks it and sets it on the table like a heavy bowl. He will not pretend it is light. He will not let it break the table. He speaks when given the chance, and he uses the same language he has always used: respect, regret, resolve. Respect for the court as a place where order is kept. Regret for any confusion his life may have caused beyond the rooms where people agreed on what work meant. Resolve to carry himself in a manner that does not add harm. He does not preach. He does not plead. He simply plants these words for anyone who needs a seed that will grow into dignity under hard weather. Outside, reporters piece together narratives that will sell. Inside, men who sweep floors and carry files continue their day with an extra nod for the man who tried to make their job easier by saying thank you at the right times. These are the credits that matter to him. He has always preferred quiet ledgers. He checks them now and finds positive balance. That will have to be enough, and in truth it is not nothing. The moving office makes a few last loops, not as parade but as housekeeping. He says farewell to corridors of habit. He shakes hands with porters and clerks who kept his routes open. He leaves instructions that sound like weather reports and courtesies that sound like promises already kept. He does not cling. He places things in order because order is portable. A man can carry it anywhere, even behind doors that decide when to open and close. He spends a final evening at home that feels like the end of a chapter done right. No speeches, simple food. The yard once more tidied against wind. He stands at a window and looks at a sky that holds no grudges. He thanks the season for its honesty. He thanks the city for its lessons. He thanks the habits that kept him from becoming a shout. He goes to bed early because morning is always a better time to begin anything, even the hard things. In the days that follow, he steps into a new schedule written by other hands. He adapts with the same tools he has always used: courtesy, precision, humor at a low setting. He finds the men who keep the new corridors running and treats them like colleagues because that is what they are. He asks about routines, and he keeps them. He learns the calendar and fills it with reading, with letters, with a small garden of patience that he tends the way some men tend herbs on a windowsill. Letters travel like trucks from his table to the tables of those he cares for. He writes in a hand that steady work has improved. He avoids drama. He offers weather. He offers advice in short sentences a man can carry in a coat pocket. Leave early, tip the porter, keep your ledger honest, call before noon. He speaks of loyalty as if it were sunlight. He will not be there in person, so he sends the part of himself that taught rooms to breathe easier. News from the outside arrives by measured channels. He reads what he must and sets aside what is not nutritious. He smiles when he hears of a shipment that beat the snow by an hour, because somewhere a clerk and a driver remembered the rhythm he taught them. He relaxes when he learns that a union hall settled a dispute with a new coat of paint and an honest calendar. These things prove that order does not live in a single man. It lives in habits people share. He looks back only as far as is useful. The tapes existed, the transcripts walked, the trial ended. A sentence was pronounced in numbers that look like a lifetime when stacked on a page. He chooses to translate those numbers into mornings. Each morning is a chance to keep his manners, to keep his humor, to keep his respect for people who turn keys and add columns and mop floors so that others can pretend the world moves by magic. He has always known the world moves by hands. He will praise those hands until his last page. He carries a final thought with him into the hard season. Calm is not surrender. Calm is the most stubborn choice a person can make when the room wants heat. He will be calm for the sake of the people who still need steadiness in their day. He will be calm for the younger men who learned schedules from him and must now keep them alone. He will be calm for himself, because a man is most himself when he keeps the rules he wrote on the good days. Late autumn becomes winter. The city continues. The car that was his desk becomes someone else's ordinary vehicle on an ordinary street. He smiles to think that the seat remembers jokes and weather reports, not tantrums. He has no use for regret that turns into theatre. He has use for dignity that turns into example. If a listener somewhere, reading a page that was meant to hurt, finds instead the outline of a life spent trying to keep days from breaking, that is a sort of victory. He will accept it. Chapter 7. Life measured by schedules and steel doors. Morning arrives as a sound before it is a light. Keys, shoes, a distant cart, air that smells of soap and steel. Anthony opens his eyes to a ceiling that belongs to the state and a day that he chooses to make his own. He begins with breath counted slowly, a habit he taught himself on busy streets and kept in courtrooms. Here it becomes a rope he can hold. He folds the blanket with tidy corners. He smooths the pillow as if company might arrive. He greets the room by making it orderly. That small victory carries weight. The schedule here is strict but not personal. A bell speaks, a door answers, a line forms. He fits himself to it without letting it take his shape. He steps into the flow with courtesy, nods to the men who keep the keys, nods to the men who walk the same narrow route, nods to the men who pretend not to nod. He protects his voice. Soft works better than sharp. Simple words last longer than clever ones. He waits his turn the way he once waited for a truck to back into a tight dock. Patience keeps knuckles whole. Patience saves the day from dents. Breakfast is a study in small choices. Take what is offered. Trade a thing you do not need for a thing you do. Thank the hands that laid and pass and wipe. The food is ordinary, the ritual is the point. Ritual makes people civil. He eats slowly, drinks water as if it were a message, and listens to the low talk around him. He recognizes the tone of men who want respect, and he gives it without bargaining. He recognizes the rhythm of men who want attention, and he pays them with silence that does not insult. He keeps a notebook that will never leave with him, so he writes as if each line is a breath, not a secret. He lists names to remember. The porter with tired eyes who never sighs. The clerk who likes to file at noon because the light then is kind to paper. A man who reads almanacs as if seasons are a map out of here. He writes reminders to himself that sound like weather reports. Drink water, walk longer, speak gently, send thanks. It is not a diary, it is a maintenance log for a human day. Work hours offer tasks that most men ignore until they need the peace those tasks give. He sweeps. He wipes down a bench as if it were a grocery scale in a neighborhood that still remembers fairness. He volunteers to tend a small strip of earth at the edge of a yard that is more concrete than soil. The ground is stingy but not hopeless. He loosens it with patience and a spoon, plants seeds that do not mind poor fortune, and waters with a cup kept in a hidden place that is not really hidden. A sprig of green answers. He guards it with his eyes and his humour. Men stop and look. The strip becomes a polite thing to nod at when there is nothing polite to say. Letters arrive like well-packed parcels. He sets them on the table of his quiet time and opens them carefully. Some are from family, some from old colleagues who keep the language clean and the news useful. Some from people he has never met, who write to say that a steady man helped them sleep when the city seemed too loud. He replies to the ones he should. He answers with schedules and gratitude, with stories that stay on the safe side of the fence. He never asks for anything he would not be willing to give. He ends many letters with a simple instruction. Keep your promises small and keep them. He sends out his own notes on a schedule that would satisfy any clerk. Mondays are for family and the practical lists families need. Wednesdays are for friends who carry weight and should not carry it alone. Fridays are for gratitude. A note to a janitor who once pushed a heavy mop with a lighter heart because someone had thanked him by name. A note to a driver who now keeps another route but still leaves early on slippery mornings because that was the habit that kept him whole. The notes bring no headlines. They are stitches in the cloth of a life that still wants to hold. News from the outside moves in two currents. The slow, official one that arrives by paper and speech. The fast, crooked one that arrives by rumour. He drinks from the first and lets the second evaporate. He reads the paper with a pencil and underlines only the parts that affect schedules. A storm coming, a new rule about deliveries, a change in a union hall hours. He ignores the parts that want him to feel like a character in a story he did not write. He has work to do, even here. Work just looks different now. In a place ruled by steel and habit, jokes are not decoration, they are tools. He keeps them clean and kind. When a guard grumbles about a broken hinge, Anthony says the door is practicing restraint. When a man at the next table curses his toast, Anthony says the bread is conserving enthusiasm for lunch. The room loosens, shoulders drop by the thickness of a coin, the day breathes. No one calls it leadership, no one needs to. The effect is the only proof that matters. He studies the map of this world the way he once studied the garment district. Corridors are lanes, benches are docks. The men who keep order are not enemies, they are porters with heavier keys. He learns names, he learns when not to use them. He learns that a minute of stillness can prevent an hour of repair. He learns which small kindnesses travel far. A compliment for a well-kept ledger, a thank you that includes a detail only care could have noticed. These are routes that deliver something better than goods. They deliver days that do not break. Memory becomes both friend and test. Faces he has not seen in years walk through his head carrying old smells and old light. He lets them pass without clinging. The past is not a bench to sit on all day, it is a handrail to steady the step you are taking now. He thinks of East Harlem mornings and listens to see whether that hum still plays under the harsh notes of this place. It does, if you tune for it. It is faint but faithful. Order, courtesy, quiet humour. The notes are there. He plays them. The calendar makes its own weather. Some days are hearings or appointments that pull him out of the routine. Those are travel days, without travel. He dresses like a clerk and keeps his eyes on the human scale. Doors opened by men doing their job. Forms handed over by women whose pens are tired by noon. He thanks them. He refuses to turn errand runners into ghosts. Seeing people is free. Seeing people is the cheapest way to keep the day from becoming cruel. He mentors without a title. A younger man who vibrates with anger sits near him at lunch. Anthony talks about schedules the way some men talk about faith. Wake before your worry, move your body, keep a ledger, quit a story that makes you feel like a hero, chase a day that makes you feel like a worker. The younger man laughs and says that sounds like a sermon in work clothes. Anthony shrugs. Work clothes are good clothes. They never go out of style. He keeps a private rule about stories told in the yard. Listen once. Do not add. Do not subtract. If a man wants more from you, ask him what part of the day he plans to improve by telling that story. Most men shrug and change the subject. A few hear themselves and quiet down. Rumour is a kind of sugar. It makes you think you have eaten, then you shake. He prefers bread. Health is a schedule too. He walks measured laps like a clock that encourages other clocks to behave. He lifts what he is allowed to lift. He stretches in the morning and at night, small movements that keep rust off hinges. He eats the food that fuels rather than the food that numbs. He sleeps at a decent hour because mornings are where dignity lives. People who sleep poorly reach for anger. People who sleep well reach for lists. He chooses lists. He keeps his temper in a drawer he never opens. There are provocations. The petty kind that live in any institution, and the special kind that follow men with names printed in papers. He answers both with the same tool, proportion. A small slight gets a smaller answer. A larger slight gets the silent treatment that comes with the courtesy of distance. He never forgets that pride is the tax that ruins so many budgets. He pays less of it every year. Old contacts send news in coded kindness. A shift in a union hall hours is described as a new bake time for bread. A schedule change on a site is described as fresh paint that must dry before anyone leans on it. He smiles at these phrases both for their care and for their caution. He writes back in the same kitchen language. Bread rises if you leave it alone. Paint dries if you stop checking it. The exchange keeps everyone human and no one foolish. He builds a small library out of borrowed pages, almanacs, a book of trees, a manual on engines that would bore a faster man and soothe a careful one. He reads the obituaries because they tell the truth about what matters. Beloved for punctuality, treasured for kindness, known for keeping a shop that always felt safe. He copies a few lines into his notebook and underlines the word beloved. It has weight he trusts. Holidays arrive with their peculiar pressure. Memory knocks harder. Rooms fill with a feeling that something is missing, even when everything required is present. He prepares by making tasks that can be finished. He writes 5 extra letters. He thanks 3 extra names. He polishes a bench. He waters the stubborn green at the yard edge twice. He surrenders the parts of the day he cannot change and changes the parts he can. The ache remains, but it does not run the show. In quiet hours he counts blessings with the same seriousness he once counted trucks. He is alive. He is literate in the language of patience. He has people who write to him without asking for favors. He has a craft that works in any room. Keep schedules, keep courtesies, keep humor. He builds a prayer out of those 3 keeps, though he would not call it that out loud. He says it in the voice he uses for instructions, and finds that it covers more ground than other words do. He does not pretend this life is smaller than it is. Steel doors have a sound that can fill the head if you let it. He answers that sound with others. The bristle of a broom, the scrape of a chair set neat, the scratch of pencil on paper, the murmur of thanks given and received. He collects these and plays them in sequence until the day seems like a machine he can tend. Machines do not love, but they can be kept from breaking if someone cares enough to oil the right parts. Visitors arrive and leave. He paces himself so that no one must comfort him. He keeps the talk on the safe side of the river and makes sure the person on the other side feels seen and respected. He sends them out with a sentence they can carry the way a porter carries a suitcase. Go easy on your afternoons. Do 3 things well. Forgive small slights before dinner. People need simple orders. Complicated ones turn dignity into homework. Sometimes at night he walks to a window that shows only fence and a sliver of sky. He takes it anyway. The sky is patient. It does not give him advice. It simply watches. He thanks it for that. He thinks of his moving office and of the streets that taught him to listen. He wonders who is riding tonight along the river road where the wind tastes like iron and plans. He hopes they are using their words the way a good driver uses the brake. Firm when needed, mostly light. He keeps a tally of what he will not let this place take. His humor, his manners, his respect for the work of others, his belief that leadership is housekeeping and not theatre, his habit of learning names, his gratitude for people who turn keys and carry trays and stamp forms with a little flourish that says, "A human hand touched this." He reviews the list when a day runs thin. The list survives, so does he. Occasionally he dreams of the garment district, not as a nostalgia trap, but as an exercise in order. Bolts of cloth leaning like tall quiet sentries, elevators sighing, phones singing their old songs. He wakes with the sense that he has been back on a dock where schedules mattered more than opinions. The feeling helps. He uses it to fuel the morning chores that bring him back into rhythm. Season by season the routine deepens. He becomes known for being even. Guards adjust to his pace. Men who once tested him look elsewhere for friction. He keeps the small garden alive through winters by tucking the soil under a blanket of leaves and hope. He waters the memory of green as if it were present. When spring makes a brave first try, he answers with a gentler hand, Life returns in a narrow line, a leaf, a shadow of a stem. It is enough to remind the yard that time has more than one setting. He writes future instructions for a day he may not see. Not about control, about pace. If the city grows loud, lower your shoulders. If a man mistakes speed for skill, give him a short task to win at. If a room forgets kindness, reintroduce it with a joke that does not bruise. If a schedule threatens to break, save the most human obligation first. He folds these notes and sends them to the men who will, for a time, hold the lanes he once kept. A roomer walks into the yard one afternoon with too much stride. Anthony lets it pass him by as if it were a truck he has no reason to flag down. Later a man asks if he heard. He says he heard the wind and will bring a coat tomorrow just in case. The man laughs and loses interest in the roomer. The yard improves by a fraction. Fractions are how you change big numbers without breaking them. He learns to end his days with a ritual that keeps sleep generous. He wipes his table. He lists 3 things he did well and 1 he will do better tomorrow. He reads a single page and closes the book before the story can claim the night. He breathes slow and thinks of trees along a sound where birds nest in quiet triangles of shade. He tells himself that rest is part of the job. Men who rest well make kinder choices in the morning. This chapter of his life is not the one the world will quote most, but it may be the one that teaches best. Schedules are a kindness. Steel is only a material. People remain people if you treat them as such. Work is noble when it keeps harm low. Humor is medicine when it keeps pride from poisoning the soup. He knows these truths hold in any room with a door and a clock. He plans to carry them as long as there are doors and clocks. He falls asleep with the same sentence most nights. Keep the day light where possible. Keep it firm where needed. Keep it human always. Morning will arrive with keys and shoes and carts again. He will meet it standing straight, coat buttoned, humour polished, ledger in mind, and a gardener's patience in his chest. That is the life he chooses within the life that was chosen for him. Choice is still a power, and he spends it with care. Chapter 8. Succession and the Shadow that Follows a Throne. Power does not depart, it changes rooms. After the long season of courts and corridors, the question that rides the avenues is simple in words and heavy in consequence. Who will keep the schedule? Who will prevent storms from turning into headlines? Anthony understands that succession is not a ceremony. It is logistics written on the inside of men. It must be handled with the same calm he once used to move a crowded dock from chaos to ordinary. He begins with a principle he trusts. The day comes first. He makes sure trucks still leave at dawn, that stewards still have a number that answers by the second ring, that bookkeepers still feel safe writing clean columns. This is not a stool. It is the foundation upon which any handover must rest. A family that works like a machine cannot be handed to a man who loves theatre more than oil. Names surface the way islands appear when the tide falls. Some are obvious because they make noise, some are quiet and therefore worth a second look. He keeps a list in his head and tests each name against a short set of questions. Does this person lower the room's shoulders? Does this person speak in plans rather than boasts? Can this person accept that a boss is really a custodian whose duty is to return every evening what the morning gave him, only a shade smoother? The late 1980s bring a new energy to certain corners of the city. Brooklyn in particular sharpens its tone. Men there speak faster and spend temper like small bills. Names like Vittorio Amuso and Anthony Casso travel from ear to ear with the speed of rumours and the weight of outcomes. They represent a different style. Harder elbows, quicker trigger tempers, softened here to sleep-safe words, yet the meaning is clear to anyone who has listened to street weather for long enough. Anthony is no fool. He knows that succession is not only a matter of his own taste, it is a contest between climates. One is the climate of patient logistics he spent decades tending. The other is a climate that believes speed and spectacle keep rivals afraid. He examines the facts as they present themselves. Influence has shifted. Certain rooms are louder. Certain streets prefer harder answers. He refuses to say the city is worse. He says only that the forecast has changed and that umbrellas must be chosen with care. He speaks to men who keep their voices low and their ledgers true. They tell him what he already knows. A leadership built on speed may make headlines. It rarely makes payroll tame. A leadership built on fear may win afternoons. It loses winters. Yet some storms are not asked for. They arrive like a guest who brings his own chair. The wise adapt without surrendering the few rules that make a life decent. Within the family, the conversation becomes a quiet geometry of seats. Who sits where? Who speaks first? Who can be trusted to listen? He sets small tests that do not look like tests. He sends a delicate correction through a man and watches whether it arrives still delicate. He asks for a schedule change that requires cooperation from two rival crews and measures how much ego gets scraped on the door. He requests an apology for a slight, measured in minutes, and observes whether the apology is shaped like respect or like a warning wrapped in ribbon. These are not games. They are X-rays. There are men who pass quickly, a lieutenant from the garment lanes who still treats porters like kin, a steward who can still fix a day with humor rather than pressure. There are men who pass by force, a street boss whose crew grew up on bumpy years and thinks smooth roads are for the weak. He notes all of them without raising eyebrows. The city yawns at men who look like candidates. It responds to men who look like answers. In circles beyond his reach, the crown begins to settle where it will. Reports arrive that the new era bears the mark of Brooklyn, that decisions grow sharp at the edges, that the soft law of courtesy has been replaced in places by a hard code of fear. He will not repeat gossip. He will acknowledge weather. He instructs his people to continue behaving as if civility remains the house rule. He tells them to speak plainly, pay on time, finish what they start, and keep their names out of rooms that love drama. He reminds them that good behavior is not weakness. It is armor that refuses to shine because it is busy doing its work. He communicates with a few who sit closer to new power. His tone is respectful, his sentence is practical, his loyalty is visible. If the lane for patient logistics still exists, he will keep it swept. If a call for courtesy can prevent a headline, he will place it. If his older lessons about proportion can save a young crew a winter of regrets, he will offer them with the humility of a man who knows that eras do not ask permission before they begin. Under the new names, Garment District feels the shift like a change in thread. There is more talk of speed. There is less tolerance for delay. Some foremen look over their shoulders more often. Some union men keep their jackets on even in warm rooms. Anthony counsels his people to double down on clarity. Clear promises are harder to mistake for defiance. He asks them to send the small courtesies that oil an angry machine. A well-timed thank you can lift a hand off a lever. In quiet letters he writes to younger men and gives them the advice he would give a son. Hold to schedules. Speak without raising the temperature. When a room asks you to choose between fear and dignity, choose dignity and accept the cost, which will be pain now rather than pain forever. Reward steadiness. It lasts longer than charisma. Praise the porter. The tenor of your praise will teach the soprano how to sing. He signs each note with his first name only, as if the lesson should stand alone without the weight of who sent it. He does not try to roll back the tide, he tries to keep boats upright. When a construction site grows hot, he suggests a day off for the loudest crew and 2 extra hands for the quiet force. When a steward begins to imitate the new fashion for shouting, he asks him to manage a small miracle instead, like moving a truck through a tight side street without a single horn. Miracles done in daylight keep boys from reaching for darkness. Brooklyn's edges sharpen further. The names of Amuso and Casso are now not only whispers but headlines, smoothed here to language fit for sleep. Tales of cold decisions, of days decided with a knife certainty, circulate like winter wind. Anthony will not repeat them. He tells his people what he has always told them. Do not build your house out of stories that move faster than facts. Hold to the work. The public will do what it does. The weather will do what it does. We will do what we do. Inside the family, some old loyalties are tested. A man who prefers patience worries he will be seen as weak by men who have learned to admire a raised voice. Another man who loves order frets that his careful ways will now be treated like delay. Anthony teaches them the trick he used in the garment years: deliver 2 minutes early. In a city leaning toward display, excellence in timing is its own persuasive act. Even men who love a hard style respect a truck that arrives exactly when the door opens. He knows that succession is a story told twice. First in rooms by men who like to speak of destiny, then on streets by men who must carry it. The street version carries more weight. He therefore invests in small acts that keep the street humane. A lunch paid for a crew that just finished a dangerous assignment without letting a single insult turn into a bruise. A seat saved for a driver who lost a cousin and needed an hour with someone who remembered the cousin's best jokes. These details do not change headlines, they change heart rate. A friend who has watched power shift for decades tells him quietly that eras end 2 ways: by choice or by exhaustion. He agrees with the second part. He does not believe in endings by choice. He believes in men who conserve energy by refusing to feed storms. He writes a set of instructions for anyone who cares to read them. When the noise rises, lower your voice. When fear sells, keep your ledger. When pride knocks, send it for a walk. When a room seeks a villain, offer it a schedule. Orders still move through him for a while, the kind that keep a city oiled, a route adjusted, a rivalry cooled by a shared job, a holiday handled with extra grace so that families who do not love each other can occupy the same space without breaking plates. He enjoys these tasks because they remind him that leadership is not a crown but a broom. A man who cannot sweep has no business sitting at any table that pretends to plan the weather. From his set-back vantage, he watches as some men turn their collars up against the new wind, while others spread their coats like sails. He refuses to judge either. Every man must decide how to keep his pride and his people warm. He sends small supplies for the first group and quiet warnings for the second. Remember that speed is not skill. Remember that fear is not law. Remember that you cannot build loyalty out of threats. Threats rent loyalty by the hour. Courtesy buys it for the season. There are names that drift through conversations about who will hold the chair in practice, not on paper. An acting figure here, a consigliere there, a crew chief asked to stretch into unfamiliar shoes. He trusts none of it fully because rumor loves to dress up in suits. He returns instead to verification by outcomes. Did the truck arrive? Did the hall stay calm? Did the bridge carry the load without groaning? If yes, someone is doing a decent job for today. Today is the only unit he spends. He allows himself one evening of elegy for the leadership style he loved, not melancholy, an inventory. He remembers the moving office and the way a city could be tuned by a tone. He remembers the union halls where a ledger and a handshake did more than a shouted speech. He remembers the garment district when a missing shipment could be found with questions and patience, rather than with the threat of a hammer. He thanks those years for their usefulness. He does not pretend they were pure. He insists they were civil most days, and that civil is a word worth saving. When men ask him what comes next, he answers with the old small truths that have carried him through seasons more dangerous than they looked. Keep your promise count low. Keep your receipts. Keep a coat on the back of your chair for sudden weather. Keep a joke in your pocket that does not wound. Keep pup person nearby who will tell you when your tone is wrong. None of these rules appears in a law book. They live where days are actually made. He watches the garment district adjust. Buyers grow more cautious. Foremen catalogue what requires permission and what simply requires competence. Union stewards keep their eyes open during meetings that used to be casual. He urges them toward a calm professionalism that has protected 1,000 kitchens. We are at our best, he tells them in letters, when our work looks boring to people who write stories for a living. He knows succession will harden into legend quickly. The city prefers clean lines and nicknames. One era will be called by 2 names that sound like steel. The previous will be reduced to one that sounded like weather. He accepts the unfairness because stories are never fair. He does what he can to leave a better set of habits behind than the stories will suggest. Habits are private statutes. Men follow them long after last names change. A few years into the new climate, he receives word, softened by friends, that certain choices have brought hard consequences to those who ride closest to the new throne. Houses shake, crews scatter. An acting figure takes a chair only to find it heavier than it looked. He resists. I told you so. He sends instead a 3-line note to a young man who once listened well. Keep your voice low, keep your list short, keep your people safe when you can and honest when you cannot. He ends many evenings thinking of the city as a school that never closes. Each principal has a style. Some styles teach fear, some teach grace, most teach a mix, imperfectly. The graduates are the people who sweep, stamp, lift, carry, count and fix. If they go home less afraid and more certain of tomorrow, the day was governed well. That remains, to him, the only measure worth keeping. Succession is finally a mirror. It shows a family what it truly values at that hour. In his time he tried to value quiet completion, kindness that did not soften the spine, punctuality that did not ask for applause. The mirror now shows a sharper face, quicker to cut, slower to forgive. He cannot sand it down from a chair he no longer sits in. He can only polish the small mirrors in other rooms, union halls, loading docks, living rooms where children fall asleep because adults kept their tempers. He writes one last instruction and tucks it into the kind of letter that gets saved in a drawer. If the crown you inherit makes you bigger, wear it. If it makes you think you are bigger, set it down and go for a walk. A city cannot afford leaders who love mirrors more than maps. Choose maps. They will tell you where people actually need you. The shadow that follows every throne is simply responsibility cast in long light. It stretches behind a man farther than he thinks and touches rooms he will never enter. Anthony believed that as long as the shadow is kept tidy, the crown can be tolerated by decent people. He kept his shadow tidy with schedules and humour and respect. Others will try their methods. The results will declare themselves. He hopes for mercy, prepares for weather, and remains convinced that the best any leader can give a city is the chance to be ordinary. Chapter 9. Legends, Press Clippings, and the Man Behind the Nickname. A city loves a story the way a tailor loves a good bolt of cloth. It runs its hands over the surface, checks the sheen, and imagines a cut that will turn heads. Anthony became cloth for 1,000 stories whether he like it or not. Some were told by men who never met him. Some were shaped by pages that needed a hook before lunch. He learned to breathe inside those stories without letting them wrinkle his manners. Press clippings arrived like weather. A headline with a grin in its voice. A column that mixed fact with theatre. The nickname repeated as if it were a magic spell. Tony Ducks. To some it meant problems slipped off his shoulders. To others it meant he knew where the rain gutters were and how to step around them. He did not argue with either version. He kept doing the work of keeping days from breaking and let the city amuse itself. He knew how myths were woven. A reporter hears a line in a hallway. A clerk repeats it to a cousin. A headline tests it for size. Soon strangers are nodding at a man they have never met, certain they understand the cut of his coat. Anthony answered this with proportion. If you cannot control the story, control your footprint. Leave fewer dents, leave more schedules that finish on time. Leave rooms that remember a pleasant tone more than a dramatic moment. The nickname had roots older than the clippings. It came from a habit of sidestepping chaos, of letting problems miss him by inches, not because he ran, but because he read wind well. He liked the weather interpretation best. Ducks are not afraid of rain. They simply manage water differently than land animals do. He treated trouble in the same way. Keep the feathers ordered. Keep moving with purpose. Shake off what you can. Dry in the sun when you must. Reporters sometimes tried to coax a sharper quote from him. He answered them with sentences built like invoices. Clear, short, and boring to anyone hoping for fireworks. The effect was consistent. Cameras blinked, disappointed. Editors sighed and moved to noisier subjects. He preferred being edited out of stories to being written into myths that would follow the wrong people home. Friends collected clippings and mailed them to him as a kind of group diary. He accepted the bundles and read them with a pencil. He underlined the parts that revealed what the city wanted from a character like him. A steady villain for some, a polite operator for others. A symbol for those who like their morals delivered with a photograph. He wrote small notes in the margins that no one else would see. This one loves adjectives. This one hates silence. This one thinks power looks like a hat. He kept a private anthology of the stories he preferred, told by people without bylines. The porter who laughed that the back seat of a certain car felt like a library. The clerk who said his meetings left her less tired than other men's meetings did. The driver who bragged that the boss never made him lie to a clock. These were reviews that never made the paper, and yet they weighed more than any banner headline. Legends are lazy when they ignore the small work that builds them. The legend said Anthony moved rivers with a phone call. The truth was humbler. He returned calls before lunch. He respected the hour at which a working person would prefer to be interrupted. He asked for the least change necessary to save a day. He paid respect as if it were a toll that kept bridges strong. Legends do not sell tickets for such habits, they simply stand on them. The city also loved to measure men in extremes, angel or monster, genius or fool. Anthony rejected the scale. People are a mixture that changes by the hour. He knew his own mixture and tried to lean it the right way. Fewer sharp edges, more steadiness, less appetite for spectacle, more appetite for completion. The nickname could stay if it helped people understand that weather can be handled with calm. Beyond that, he owed no performance to anyone. There were weeks when the myth made life heavier for the people around him. A cousin called to say a neighbor believed every tall tale and had started treating the family as if they were made of glass. Anthony wrote a letter that offered an antidote. Live ordinary on purpose. Return what you borrow faster than anyone expects. Compliment the neighbor's roses. Nothing unravels superstition faster than reliability and roses. He noticed the way newspapers shifted tone over the years. Early on they whispered like gossipers on a stoop. Later they sharpened like knives in a drawer. After the trials they settled into the rhythm of post-game analysis, as if the city had watched a season of sport. He wished for better, but he did not waste energy on the wish. Let the papers play their game. He would keep playing his, which was to keep scenes from becoming stories at all. From time to time he granted a kindness to a young writer who had done homework and who did not treat him as a prop for a moral. The kindness was not a confession, it was a lesson in infrastructure. He spoke of schedules and routes, of how to move goods while keeping tempers in a manageable range, of how to read rooms for permission and for restraint. If a writer could hear that the city ran on courtesies, not just on charge sheets and secrets, then the city might become kinder by a fraction. The nickname followed him into places where names have different weights. In a chapel, a man shook his hand and said the word with a smile that felt like a wink. In a medical ward, a nurse said it softly, as if telling a child the name of a harmless animal at the zoo. He took the word wherever it landed, and emptied it of threat by being himself. Polite, on time, he thanked people for their work. He kept his tone steady, he made the moniker mean weather again. He also refused to let legend erase contradiction. He had made choices that hurt. He had managed a machine capable of harm even on days when he asked it to be gentle. He did not rewrite his life into something clean enough for a bedtime story without shadows. He simply chose to tell the truth in the way that helped the most people sleep. Calm is honest when it is earned. He tried to keep earning it, wear small courtesy at a time. In the neighborhood that raised him, the story was simpler. He was the boy who returned chairs, the young man who kept his coat brushed, the adult who marked time with kindness. Older women remembered him for errands done without brag. Older men remembered him for never wasting their afternoons with speeches. They did not need the nickname. They already had a name for him. Reliable. The city also likes to frame a man by the houses he kept. Anthony had the address by the water where a rake could be leaned against a neat fence. He had the moving office that made the avenues his hallway. He had rooms where chairs were punctual, and food came wrapped in brown paper. The legend tried to turn those rooms into stages. He answered by turning them into workshops. No spotlight, just lamps and lists. He was asked once by a friend if he resented the cartoon version of his life that ran in headlines after the case. He said no and meant it. Cartoons are for people who need simple shapes. Real days are for people who turn keys and push brooms and sign forms and lift boxes. He had lived many real days. He was content to be known by the men and women who value such days. The rest could have their outlines and their clever captions. Even in the later years, when corridors and seasons had changed him, he kept the habit of collecting small human proofs that the legend could not touch. A guard who offered an extra minute of air to a man returning to a cell. A clerk who kept a stack of sharpened pencils, because men write better when the point is crisp. A chaplain who learned first names and used them with respect, not as a tool of control. These were the deeds that defined the city he served, not the blasts of ink that came and went. He looked for humour in the mirror of public opinion. If a page called him invincible, he laughed, because he knew how fragile mornings are for every man. If a column called him finished, he laughed because he knew the only finish line is the last good deed you manage before sleep. Humour deflated both praise and blame until they fit into an envelope. Inside that envelope he kept schedules, grocery lists, names of people to thank. A generation grew up with the nickname and asked their uncles what it meant. The uncles told a version that made sense for a backyard on a summer evening. He met some of those children when they were adults. They expected a towering figure with a horn in his hand. They found a man who asked about their work hours and whether their bosses respected lunch. They seemed disappointed for a minute, then relieved for longer. It is tiring to live in a city of statues. It is easier to live in a city of people who act right. He encouraged his crew to keep the myth at arm's length. When a story made someone nervous, he suggested a task. Deliver the thing early. Fix the complaint before it walks. Write the thank you note with the name spelled right. In shops and sites and small offices, competence blunts myth like a plane smooths wood. The shine comes from labour, not legend. Some suggested capitalising on the nickname to gain advantages. He refused. Trade on courtesy, he said. Trade on punctuality. Trade on honesty so boring that it humiliates liars by existing. If you start trading on myth, the market will make you pay with your soul. Men nodded, half understanding. Years later, a few wrote to say they had learned what he meant the long way. Historians called sometimes gentle voices in search of a past they could package. He gave them what he could without feeding sensational appetites. He described the fabric of the garment district and the tempo of union halls. He spoke of the unspoken agreements that kept families safe and work steady. He acknowledged harm without turning it into theatre. He offered the balance he wished he had seen more often in print. Some wrote it down faithfully, others went back to sharper ink. That was their choice. He collected 3 teachings from the years of being a headline. The city will draw you as it needs, not as you are. The only defence is to act in ways that make the drawing less harmful. Next, the truth does not defend itself. It must be practiced daily until it grows too heavy to ignore. And last, kindness travels farther than gossip. It simply takes the local roads. On a quiet afternoon near the end of a long season, he sorted papers at a table no longer his own and set aside a few clippings for the trash. He hesitated over one that had the tone of a good neighbour. The writer had described him as a man who kept tempers from burning down kitchens. The line pleased him because it understood scale. Save kitchens and you save families. Save families and you save a city from eating itself. He folded the clipping and placed it in a book about trees. He wrote a letter that same night to a young relative who asked how to carry a name that had been shouted by strangers. Carry it like a lunch pail, he wrote. Put useful things inside. A joke that does not hurt. A plan for the morning. A habit of saying thank you. If someone wants to admire the pail, let them. If someone wants to mock it, let them. Your job is to bring lunch to work. In his final reflections, he allowed himself one line of pride. He had not let the nickname turn him into a performer. He had kept his energies for the only stage that mattered to him, the one with trucks and porters and clerks and stewards and families waiting for a door to open at dinner. He had left behind patterns of behaviour that other men could use. Patterns weigh more than rumours. Patterns are what keep a city from rattling apart. He thought of East Harlem mornings and the way the city taught him to listen. He thought of the garment district and the way it taught him to coordinate without boasting. He thought of the moving office and the way it taught him to use motion to calm, not to flaunt. These were the true chapters, not the ones written by people paid by the word. He wished for every reader to learn that a headline is a weather report, not a map. Maps are made by hands on wheels and hands on ledgers. As for the legend, he let it stand at a distance like a statue in a square. People need places to meet. People need symbols to point at when telling their children stories about a city that is too large to hold in nigh conversation. He simply hoped that when the stories ended and the lights went off, those same people would set their alarm for the morning and promise to keep a schedule. That promise, kept, was the only tribute he ever wanted. He had been called many things: boss, gentleman, ghost, duck. He preferred caretaker. It is not a glamorous name. It is a job title that asks for respect and receives little attention. It is the name you give the person who makes sure the chairs are set and the doors are locked and the lights work for the next shift. He felt most himself when doing such tasks, even when the city tried to imagine him as something else. The clippings yellowed, as they always do. Stories lost their teeth. Names on bylines retired or moved to other towns. The city found new characters to admire and to scold. Anthony kept to his narrow lane of dignity. In that lane he tried to leave ruts deep enough that others could follow them without straining. If they did, then the legend might finally have performed a useful service by pointing people toward a quieter path. He ended the chapter with a small grace, a thank you spoken to a porter who held a door a second longer, a nod to a guard who returned a pen, a smile to a clerk who corrected a date before it caused trouble. These were the edits that kept his life in the tense he preferred: present and human, not the past tense of obituary, not the future tense of threat. A steady present where a man could make the next hour kinder than the last. Chapter 10. The Calm After the Sirens. Morning begins with soft chores and a view that prefers trees to traffic. The world that used to demand 5 phones and a moving office now asks for a kettle, a pen, and a chair that faces daylight. Anthony wakes as he always has, to a schedule he wrote the night before. He makes the bed as if a guest might inspect it. He opens a window to listen for a city that is mostly memory and still somehow present in the wind. He starts the day by naming 3 things to be grateful for: breath, warmth, work to do, even if the work is lighter and smaller. The final years are not an epilogue so much as a different chapter with gentler verbs. He answers letters, he keeps a garden of patience, he tends a circle of friends who appreciate the way a steady man keeps time. He no longer sits at a table with 5 chairs, yet he honours the lessons those chairs taught: proportion, courtesy, precision. He uses them to guide a quieter house and a few rooms where younger people now set the pace. The work is to bless what they do well and to nudge what they might do better, without mistaking advice for ownership. He walks each day like a man sweeping his own sidewalk, slow, methodical, looking down enough to catch a trip hazard and up enough to notice the sky. His body carries seasons, some kind and some stern. Knees that once climbed warehouse stairs complain in a joking register. Shoulders that once held the weight of corridors and cars now prefer a sweater and a seat near a window. He listens to these messages without argument. He has negotiated with tougher voices. The body is a partner who deserves respect and a reasonable calendar. Calls still come, but the tone has changed. Old friends check in with stories that feel like postcards. Younger lieutenants, now leaders, ask for a sentence or two that can turn a moment from heat to light. He gives them the same medicine he has always offered. Be early, be kind, be brief. Never let someone leave a room unsure of the next decent step. If you must say no, pad it with respect so that the person can carry it home without breaking it against their pride. Then he hangs up and returns to his tea, smiling at the way advice has grown lighter even as it lands with the same weight. He keeps his humour oiled because humour is still the best hinge on any door. When the garden refuses to behave, he says the tomatoes are union and on break. When the kettle takes too long, he says time is conserving itself for the afternoon. When a neighbour complains about a small delay with big emotion, he offers a gentle line, "Let us call it weather," and dress accordingly. The neighbour laughs, the day returns to scale, and the old craft of downsizing panic earns another quiet victory. He makes a study of ordinary kindness. A grocery bag carried for a woman who pretends she does not need held but says thank you twice. A tip for a porter that includes a name and a note about a job well done. A letter to a clerk who corrected a date and saved 6 people a headache they will never know they avoided. These gestures cost little and spend well. He treats them like deposits in a bank that always pays interest, even when accounts elsewhere run tight. When memories visit, he seats them like guests at a calm table. The hum of East Harlem mornings, the garment district's perpetual sewing machine of phones and carts, the car that turned motion into manners, the day the air grew ears and transcripts became weather, the corridors that smelled of paper and polish. He lets each memory speak, and then he thanks it for service. He does not let any of them take over the room. Memory is honoured best when it leaves a person steadier than it found him. He refuses to argue with age, he negotiates. Shorter walks more often, heavier books, fewer pages per day, conversations that end on time instead of drifting toward the long dark, where people say things they cannot fold into their pockets. He eats in measured portions and sleeps in measured hours. Temperance is not a punishment to him. It is a tuning that keeps the instrument in service. Visitors arrive with a mixture of curiosity and affection. Some want stories that sound like movies. He offers them lessons that sound like blueprints. How to keep a crew on time without making anybody feel small. How to praise in a way that trains the room to imitate competence. How to endure a season of eyes and ears by acting as if an honest clerk will one day read your day aloud. Most visitors accept the blueprint once they see it can be used tomorrow morning. The rest drift away in search of fireworks. He holds no grudge. People need different kinds of light. When he travels, it is inside the narrow lanes of routine. A doctor's office where the receptionist keeps the line moving with a pleasant authority that would have earned her a desk in any union hall. A chapel where the air remembers names better than town record do. A park bench that faces water so flat it feels like a promise. These places ask nothing of him but good manners. He pays gladly. He writes more than he ever did in the busiest years. Pages of advice boiled to friendly sentences. Notes of thanks that name specifics. Stories told without the sharp edges that keep sleep away. He avoids the heavy words. Destiny, empire, fate. He prefers the practical ones. Roots, receipts, relief. People live on receipts and relief. He sends both by mail, in ink that does not smudge, to men and women who carry their own heavy calendars. Newspapers still mark anniversaries in ink that is brighter than memory. He reads a few pieces and sets them aside before they sour the tea. Legend is a coat that no longer fits. He keeps it on the back of a chair for guests who expect a certain silhouette. When they leave, he returns to his sweater of chores, a broom, a list, a pencil with a point. He keeps a private ledger of avoided storms even now. A young cousin who chose a union apprenticeship over a faster road and now comes home tired in the right way. A foreman who swallowed a prideful remark and kept a crew intact through a long week. A neighbour who learned to call before noon and to start meetings with facts instead of theatre. He draws a line in the ledger for each and writes the same word beside them, kept. The city survives on things kept. Kept promises, kept tempers, kept schedules. He accepts that he will not see the outcome of every seed he planted. That is fine. A gardener takes pride in sprouts he will never sit under. He asks only that the men and women who inherited his roots remember the shape of the lanes, slow the truck for rain, pay with gratitude as often as with coin, call the porters by name, be generous with apologies and stingy with excuses. If they do these small things, the big weather will take care of itself, or at least do less harm. On quiet afternoons he plays a game he learned in rooms with no clocks. He names a person he has not thanked enough and imagines the message he owes them. The nurse who kept a door open a second longer. The deputy who chose courtesy when no one was watching. The clerk who gave him a pencil during a long wait. He feels the balance shift toward even. Then he writes a real note to someone he can still reach, because imagination is not payment, it is only a reminder. Some days bring harsher weather. News that a man he liked has been unalived by hard hands in a hard season. News that a crew lost its temper and will now lose its freedom. He grieves in the only way that feels honest. He calls one person who can do a little good and asks them to do it. A letter to a family. A small fund for a child's school needs. A visit to a shopkeeper who feels less safe today than yesterday. He refuses to let grief turn into a speech. He turns it into errands. He studies his own myth with gentle skepticism. He knows what the name meant in different mouths. To some he was a cautionary tale with good posture. To others he was a gentleman of the wrong business who treated working people right. He is not burdened by either mask. He is interested in being a decent elder. If tales help a young man walk away from a showy mistake, let the tales stand. If they puff a fool into arrogance, let the wind take them. A dog from a nearby house adopts his stoot as a second duty post. The animal sits like a guard but greets everyone like a clerk who likes his job. Anthony scratches the ear and says hello as if addressing a colleague. Animals teach him again what the city taught him first. Routine calms. A calm presence shortens fights. Food on time keeps panic from inventing ideas. He shares a biscuit. The dog shares a piece of quiet. The trade is fair. He keeps Wart drawer for memento, and it is smaller than people would guess. A matchbook from a diner where decisions turned into routines. A note from a porter whose boots were replaced and whose pride grew 3 inches that day. A clipping folded to a paragraph that understood him in a way he could live with. He adds little, removes little, and never lets the drawer become a museum. Museums are for endings. Drawers are for tools. Younger men ask for a rule they can memorize. He gives them the one that saved him more often than any other. Do not make a person choose between pride and cooperation. Design your ask so that they can keep both. A man who keeps both will work with you again. A man who loses either will sand your name out of his memory. He sees the rule land and he knows it will live longer than any nickname. Some evenings feel like a station platform after the last train. Quiet, damp, with a sense that the day is considering whether to call itself finished. He sits with that feeling and lets it tell him what he missed. A call he should have returned, a thank you he should have spoken earlier, a cup he should have washed instead of leaving for morning. Then he fixes what he can fix now and saves the rest for the first light. He sleeps better when the platform is swept. He revisits his oldest belief and finds it still holds. Power is punctual, influence is returned calls, leadership is housekeeping. None of it asks for applause. All of it deserves respect. He considers that he spent his life moving the city, 1 inch toward being bearable in its busiest rooms. That inch is not nothing. People had dinners they would have missed. Children slept through sirens that never started. Workers took home money that arrived without a fight. These results comfort him more than any headline ever could. When age presses harder, he simplifies again. Fewer visitors, briefer talks, longer looks at water, trees, and the kind eyes of people who learned early what work is. He asks for help without embarrassment and offers help without drama. He keeps his tone even. He lets others talk. He has learned that the best gift an elder can give is not advice but a calm room where advice may be heard. A celebration arrives disguised as an ordinary day. A niece brings sweet rolls. A neighbour drops off a book of bird drawings. A former driver calls to say that his grandchild was born with a grip like a foreman. The house fills with the small thunder of life continuing. Anthony stands in the kitchen and feels the old hum under the floors, a hum that started in East Harlem and never stopped. He thanks the guests and the gifts and the weather. The celebration is not for him, it is for the proof that the city keeps its promises when people keep theirs. He composes a last set of instructions, not legal, not loud, just a page for the people who loved him, and for the people who learned from him without ever shaking his hand. Start early. Dress like you respect your tasks. Tip the porter. Return the chair you borrowed. Avoid speeches that make the next hour harder. Be the person who lowers shoulders. If you must choose between winning and keeping the day whole, keep the day whole. He signs it with his first name. The page does not need more. On a late afternoon that smells like rain, he sits by a window and watches the street prepare. People speed up by a fraction. Dogs pull a little less. A bus driver smiles at nobody in particular and checks his mirrors as if they are friends. The first drops hit a steady rhythm on the glass. Anthony breathes in and names what he hears. Order, even in weather. He is grateful for the art that let him carry a piece of that order through a noisy age. He knows that someone else will tell the final version of his days. That is the nature of stories. He prefers to leave behind tools rather than morals. A folded map, a list of numbers, a few jokes that open, stuck doors, a belief that city life can be civilized if enough people practice small courtesies with the attention they give to large grudges. He leaves these on the table for anyone to take. There is no charge. The only price is practice. The last thing he wants the city to remember has no nickname attached to it. He wants the clerk to remember feeling seen. He wants the driver to remember the relief of a calendar that did not insult him. He wants the porter to remember new boots. He wants the neighbor to remember that a steady voice can make rain feel like weather rather than warning. In these memories, his life will keep working long after his name is a yellowed line in a file. Night comes early now and he welcomes it. The lamps are warm, the cup is clean. The list for morning is short and friendly. He lays out a sweater and a pencil. He writes 3 names he will thank tomorrow and 3 tasks he will complete before lunch. He turns off the radio with a small nod, as if acknowledging a colleague's shift is over. He breathes the way he taught himself to breathe in rooms with too many ears. Slow, honest, ready for morning. He has kept the simple oath he wrote as a boy who watched more than he spoke. Be useful, be kind, be on time. He added a few lines as the years asked him to grow. Protect the ordinary, reduce harm, make dignity easy. He has not always succeeded, no man does, but he has tried in every room he entered to leave it lighter and better arranged. That is a service worth the effort. Somewhere a car passes on a distant road. He hears it and smiles, not at the legend of a moving office, but at the sound of a machine doing a job without fuss. The world is full of such sounds. If more people loved them, fewer people would love the sounds that steal sleep. He closes his eyes on that thought, and the house holds its breath in the careful way of a place that has learned to respect quiet. The city outside lowers its shoulders by a degree. In the end, the calm after the sirens is not silence. It is the steady choir of human tasks done well. A broom, a ledger, a lunch pail, a timetable met without a speech. He listened for that choir all his life. He tried to conduct a small section of it. He hopes others will keep time after him. If they do, the city will be all right. Not perfect, not pure, just all right. For a place as large and hungry as New York, all right is a miracle performed daily by ordinary hands.